ನಾವು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವರು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಆದರೆ ಶಶಾಂಕ್ ಅವರು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಡಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಶ್ರಮಿಸಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಅವರು ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಆದರೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನರು ದೇಶದಾದ್ಯಂತ ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತು ಕೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ತಯಾರಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಕ್ಷಮೆ ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ಅವರು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಆದರೆ ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಶಶಾಂಕ್ ಅವರು ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಹೇಳಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾವು ಈ ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರುವುದಿಲ್ಲ, ಆದರೆ ಅವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳುವ ಮುಂಚೆ little bit about PUCL itself. The People's Union Civil Liberties was formed during the emergency and is a human rights organization which has been the forefront of civil liberties struggles in this country. In a sense, PUCL begins with the advocating against the entire issue of state violence, be it police torture, be it the entire question of encounter deaths, with a range of other such issues. And the way of PUCL's work has been through fact findings, has been throwing light upon issues on which there's been very little otherwise understanding in this country. And one way we can understand the relevance of PUCL today, just one way, is if you read the Supreme Court judgments. ನಾವು ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ತೀರ್ಪುಗಳನ್ನು ಓದಿದರೆ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ತೀರ್ಪುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಟಲ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಟಲ್ ಏನು ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದರೆ PUCL ವರ್ಸಸ್ ಯೂನಿಯನ್ ಆಫ್ ಇಂಡಿಯಾ. ಅದು ಯಾವ ಥರ ಕೇಸಸ್ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಎನ್ಕೌಂಟರ್ ಡೆತ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಟಾರ್ಚರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲದ್ರೆ ರೈಟ್ ಟು ಫುಡ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಇಂಥ ಕೇಸಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ PUCL ಹೆಸರು ಮುಂದೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಒಂದು ರೋಲು PUCL ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮಾನವ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳ ಹೋರಾಟಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತೆಗೆದಿದೆ ಅಂತ. ಇದು PUCL ಅಟ್ ದ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್. ಆದರೆ ನಾವು PUCL ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಯಾರು PUCL ಸ್ಥಾಪನೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಪಾತ್ರ ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್. He was the president of PUCL from 1995 to 2015, and he was a former professor of English at Bangalore University and a lover of the works of James Joyce and W.B. Yeats. On that point, we'd really like to welcome both Professor Babaya and Professor Ramdas Rao, both of whom are here and were colleagues and friends of his for many, many, many years. If you look back at Professor Mansoor's career in the human rights movement, and this not many people know, but we found out that as young as 19 years of age, before India became independent, he was arrested by the Broadway police and he was in police lockup. And we'd like to know that it is from that moment of arrest that his entire thing of fighting against police violence and police torture really emerged. And since that time, he's been a tireless advocate against police violence in the state and really the heart and the soul of the People's Union of Civil Liberties in Karnataka. ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಅವರ ಕೊಡುಗೆ ಏನಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿದರೆ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಅಂಶ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅವರು ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಹೋರಾಟಗಳನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್, ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಲೈಂಗಿಕ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರ ಹೋರಾಟ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಲೈಂಗಿಕ ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರ ಹೋರಾಟ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಸ್ಲಮ್ ಜನಾಂದೋಲನ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಣ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಅವರೇ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಅದು ಮತ್ತು ಅವರ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕೊಡುಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಾವು UDHR ನೋಡಿದರೆ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಲುಕ್ ಅಟ್ ದಿ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಲ್ ಡೆಕ್ಲರೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್, ದಿ ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಲೈಯಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಬಾರ್ನ್ ಫ್ರೀ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಈಕ್ವಲ್ ಇನ್ ಡಿಗ್ನಿಟಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್. ಯಾರು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಕೂಡ ಇಂಟ್ರ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಘನತೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಪೂರ್ತಿಯಾಗಿ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಯಾವ ಪರ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟೆಡ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ, ಯಾವ ಮಾರ್ಜಿನಲೈಸ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗ ಅವರು ಅವರ ಘನತೆಯನ್ನು ಗೌರವಿಸಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದರು. ನಾವು ಎಷ್ಟು ಯುವಕರಿದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ, ಯಾವ ಪರ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟೆಡ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಇದ್ದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಮಾತಾಡುವುದು ನೋಡಿದರೆ he understood the meaning of the entire question of dignity at its very heart. And the other, maybe a couple of other quick points on what Professor Mansur was responsible for, which we know, that if we, in Karnataka today, the State Human Rights Commission, the functioning of the State Human Rights Commission and the fact that it was even established and with the office bearers was really a work of the tireless activism of Professor Mansur. And we all know that if you went to him and said that will you come for the meeting which is organized on the behalf of slum dwellers' rights or sex workers' rights, he would be there with a small notebook, taking notes and attending all our meetings. That unceasing enthusiasm for range of human rights was really Professor Mansur. And perhaps one other point to make is Professor Mansur embodied a form of modesty, intellectual curiosity, and a gentleness which really gestured towards another way of being a leader. He was a man of tremendous achievements, forged in over 40 years of public service in the field of human rights, and he also understated the depth of his contribution by preferring to avoid the limelight. And one last point, when we're talking about Professor Mansur ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡುವಾಗ ಮಿಸಸ್ ಹಸ್ನತ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಅವರು ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ಮಾತಾಡಲೇಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಹೋದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್, ಮಿಸಸ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಇಬ್ಬರು ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದರು. The life that Mrs. and Mr. Mansur led in close companionship for over 40 years of togetherness consisted of laughter, poetry, and politics. For us, it was in every way an ideal relationship, founded on the deepest love. And we really miss Mrs. Mansur, who could not be here today because of a little bit of ill health. And she sends her best wishes as far as this particular event is concerned. The final point I'll make is today's lecture for us embodies PUCL's commitment to remembering Professor Mansur. For PUCL, remembering the past is also about building the future. It is about rededicating ourselves to continuing the work he was committed to. We can think of no one better to honor everything Professor Mansur stood for than someone who knew him very well and, dare I say, learned from him as well, namely good friend Clifton de Rosario. I'll leave it to Aishwarya to introduce Clifton. Do we need to introduce Clifton, or we just allow him to come and speak now? Just two words. You read it, okay.
Most of us already know Clifton. Namellagu Clifton gotte ide, but he's an advocate, he's a human rights lawyer, and he's worked on a number of issues concerning labor rights, concerning human rights. He's been very active in a lot of civil society circles concerning justice against communal violence and various other social justice issues. We welcome him, and we hope that all of you can participate in the discussion after Shashank's translation as well. So, welcome Clifton.
Good evening, everyone. This is by far the best introduction. It's actually a great honor and it's a great privilege. Professor Mansur, Professor Ramdas Rao and Professor Babaya, three people who are here in this room, and of course Professor Babu Matthew. These are people who we met when we were very young. All of us were young, idealistic, full of anger, very angry at that time at the Congress and what the Congress was doing to our country. Little did we know that maybe 30 years later, our anger would have been shifted a little more towards the BJP. But at that time, Arvind was saying, one of the most compelling things about Professor Hasan Mansur was his humility. We were young students. I mean, I think I was in my final year of engineering. I think we were all in our final year at that time. And when we'd meet him and rage about, I remember Pokhran blast had happened at that time, 1998. And we were raging about it, that this is fascism, that, this and the other. and he listened patiently to us. Also, of course, Professor Ramdas, who used to fondly call Ramu, and he'd still at that time, he'd, listen to that. But Professor Mansur would listen to you so patiently, and he would say in his most expressive way, yes, Mr. Clifton, that is such a good point. And you'd think that you made this real revolutionary point. Of course, then years later, you will think that it's the most basic point that you made. But Professor Mansur, that's the kind of person he was. And definitely, if one has become a little more humble over a period of time, I think in that Professor Mansur's contribution is something I very fondly remember Professor Mansur today, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful that I have been given this honor, to give this lecture on his behalf. So I think with this, I'd like to move forward. And like I said, the challenges that were there when we met Professor Mansur, and perhaps the challenges that were there in the 40 years, 50 years of human rights activism that Professor Mansur, those challenges that he faced are completely different from the challenges we face today. But there were challenges nevertheless. The idea of India as a new democracy, as a newly freed country with a dream, with a lot of passion, etc., etc., those birthing problems are something that Professor Mansur, I would imagine, spent most of his time that he was working on. For instance, the issues of centralism, fighting feudalism. We were not even talking about, and if you look at even pre-90s, we still talked about the notion of a communal right. Now a communal right seems like such a distant past, and it still seems like a past which you could deal with. It was an issue that you could have actually dealt with. Today, communal rights are almost a matter of history. We moved so far ahead in the manner in which this democracy in our country has been unraveled. So I think one of the things that I'd really like to do is, and we are celebrating 75 years of Indian independence. It's called, there's some Hindi names for everything that they keep giving. Amrit Mahotsav. I mean, it's compelling you to really learn Hindi. I don't mind Hindi. I like Hindi. I can speak Hindi fairly well. But this, everything being in Hindi I think, it's not an accident. It is something that is very, very conscious. But anyway, coming back to the point, I think 75 years is a good time for us to look back. What is it that we have achieved? What is it that we've able to save? I mean, if we are today free, and if I am able to stand here, and if I'm able to say that we are in fascism today, and that there's a fascist regime that is falling on us, it's my freedom. And that freedom is something that was a gift of the freedom struggle. But I think the biggest gift of the freedom struggle, or rather, I think the biggest gain of the freedom struggle was democracy. India didn't know democracy the way we know it today. And at that point in time, there was so much of a foresight that yes, this country needs to be a democracy. It doesn't have that kind of thing. Baba Sahib Ambedkar in fact says it's just the topsoil of Indian society. We still have a very long way to go. But the imagination was that you're going to build a democratic country. And what do we mean by democracy? I'm really going to say some things which are rather, which may seem rather simple. But from what I've learned in the time that I worked with several communities across the country, some of the things are really not simple. If I were to say that democracy in its essence is equality, we all know that that's really not reality in our country. And it's not just today. This is a reality that's been there for a very long time. When India got independence and elections were held, communities had to fight for that right to vote. Just to be able to go to that ballot box, and yes, it was a ballot box then, to go to that ballot box and cast your vote. That was a battle. So communities had to stand up, and that was the feudal nature in villages, where entire communities were not allowed to cast their votes. So when I talk about democracy, some of the things that I'm going to speak, I think it's really important for us to go back to those things. And right now, if I say some of these things, it may actually sound rather romantic. I think that's the kind of situation that we have come to. One of the things that I'd like to, I always say, is when we talk about democracy, to make, at least in terms of, for people to understand, the essential attributes of it are really not difficult to communicate. The preamble of our constitution, in effect, contains it in letter and spirit. So when we talk about justice, when we talk about equality, when we talk about liberty, and when we talk about fraternity, these, in my opinion, are the essential attributes of a democracy. Now, where we stand insofar as those ideals actually being realized, that's a separate question. What's the journey? That's a separate question. But the fact is that when you talk about democracy, and it sometimes is very difficult to digest, when you have people from fascist parties talking about democracy, saying that India is the greatest democracy. Democracy is not that one day where you go and cast your vote. That's hardly the democracy. Democracy is what happens in the everyday. It's in the everyday of every person living in this country. And those basic dreams that people had for this nation at the time of Constitution, in my opinion, the preamble in a way kind of captures that. One can get into a very legalistic debate about the fundamental rights and directive principles. I'm really not on that. I'm only talking about the essence of democracy as it was dreamt of, as it still stands in paper in our country. The other thing I feel is, which is very important for us to understand, is that democracy really, for me, it's the way a society is structured. It's really not just about a relationship that one has with the state, that you cast a vote, that you're able to make governments fall, so on and so forth. But I think it's extremely important for us to also understand that democracy is in effect the way a society is conditioned. And that, I would say, please bear in mind as we go ahead from here. And I think at the end of 75 years, one of the things that we can definitely agree upon is that it's at a crossroads. Is it going to continue down this path, or is it going to take a completely different trajectory? And I don't think that there is any need for us to speculate on that, because the declarations are there. You have elected members of parliament, you have MLAs, you have our own chief minister, you have members of the Bharatiya Janata Party who now openly say that this is a Hindu Rashtra. This was meant to be a Hindu Rashtra, and we will make it an Hindu Rashtra. Whereas, and of course, Hindu Rashtra is totally incompatible with democracy. I don't think there has to be any kind of doubt about that. So when you have these kinds of declarations being made, I think it's really time for us to pull our socks up and just understand the nature of this challenge, and then find ways in how we are going to fight it. So when I talk about this current, a lot of times, even in our introduction, of course, what is happening with the Muslim community and with the Christian community is something that all of us condemn, and we know the kind of dangers that these communities are facing. But I think if you were to look at this particular historical juncture of our country, we need to look at it a little more comprehensively. The kinds of economic inequality that we are seeing in our country today is unparalleled. The kind of exploitation, economic exploitation, that is taking place in our country today, it is unprecedented. So when you talk about when you talk about a democracy, and when you talk about, say, even economic equality is something that this country thoroughly lacks. And what the COVID did, the pandemic and the most undemocratic lockdown, the most undemocratic decision of 4 hours lockdown that was declared, what that did was it just put a mirror and showed you how unequal the country is, and how the majority of the people in this country live a hand-to-mouth existence. The work that all of us did, and I think every one of us actually did during the lockdown, when we reached out not just to the migrant workers, to the daily wage workers from our own state, where I remember one person saying, in my life, I have never put my hand out to anyone, in my life. And it's a matter of shame for me that I am having to call you up to say, give me food. That rings in my ear even till this date. And when we talk about Professor Mansur and dignity, etc., I'm saying, look at this situation that this government has brought our country to. You have people who are dignified, earning their living, however tough the odds, who were literally reduced to beggars at that time. And that's what they considered themselves. They considered themselves that. They said that we didn't want to stretch our hands out, but we've been forced to stretch our hands out. So I think we really need to take stock of the kind of economic inequality. I was just reading this particular report by the National Statistical Office. It's of September 2021, which says that the per day income of farm households is about rupees 277. It's just shocking. I really have no more words to say about that. If you earn 15,000 rupees in this country today, you're living a life of comfort. I mean, if you look at the kind of the kind of classifications that are made in our state of Karnataka, which is supposed to be much better in terms of minimum wages. Professor Babu Matthew is here, is somebody who's worked on this for so many decades. You earn 10,000 rupees minimum wage, it is supposed to be good. The sanitation workers who are sweeping our streets day in and day out in this very state earn 14,000 rupees after great struggle. Contract workers earn only 8,000 rupees. So when we are talking about this the violence of on communities today, I think it is absolutely unescapable, and that is something that we really cannot deny. The second aspect, I think, which really makes this an unprecedented time is the denial of equality. And in that, I think it is about Muslims, it's about Christians, it's about women, it's about Dalits, it's about Adivasis, it's about every single persecuted community today that explicitly is being told that you will not be made equal. That entire promise that was there in the Constitution, it does not extend to you. And it doesn't extend to you because we don't believe in the democracy the way it is, and we don't believe in the Constitution the way it is. This is unprecedented. A lot of friends keep telling me, that there's really no difference between the Congress and the BJP. And I think, for me, I think there's a fundamental error being made over there. Am I a friend of the Congress? Absolutely not. And I have a very sharp critique of Congress, not as they existed 30, 40 years ago, as they exist in the form of the government in Chhattisgarh, as they exist in the form of the coalition government in Jharkhand, what they're doing, say, in Hasdio, what they're doing in Netarhat, where 245 Adivasi villages are being displaced. Of course, we critique them. But the fundamental difference is they don't have a project of Hindu Rashtra explicitly. They don't have the backing of a supremacist organization like the RSS and that entire organizational network across the country. They don't have an explicit open plan to take the Constitution, dump it, and replace it with some other document. There is a fundamental difference over here. And of course, if we don't realize that that difference is what is being put into action today, I think we're really making a very serious mistake. The third aspect, I think, which we really need to bear in mind is the undermining of every kind of democratic institutions of accountability, every single institution. I think this notion even of free and fair elections that used to exist, now it's literally a joke. When you see an election is happening, you know what the election commission is going to do. You know the ED raids are happening, it definitely means that 5 months down the line or 6 months down the line, some election is going to take place. You know some cases are registered, somebody has been arrested, and they get bail. You know probably they're going to join the BJP. It's literally as open and blatant as that. And I'm talking about Hardik Patel over here. I think today when we look at what's happening, there's literally a mockery of the Constitution that is being made. So when you have an elected government at the center and in several states that talks about the Constitution, that talks about democracy, and does every single thing contrary to it, every single thing contrary to it, that is a mockery of the Constitution. And it's an undermining of federalism. You have at least Tamil Nadu to some extent stands up the attack on federalism. Look at what's happening in Karnataka. Our Karnataka BJP government doesn't mind if Hindi takes over the state. They don't care. Because their agenda is completely different. Their agenda is the agenda of the RSS. So they have no love lost for Basavanna. They don't mind even misconstruing not even misconstruing, deliberately misleading what Basavanna did in the state. The entire fight against the caste system, in the textbook revision, they've completely underplayed it. This is the kind of change, I think, that is happening. The second, I think, very, very important aspect that we need to understand is the kind of corporate takeover that is happening. Previous governments, didn't they do this? Of course they did that. There's no doubt about it. But there is a fundamental difference today. When you have 5, 6 families that are now Karodpati, and in the sense, Karodpati, I don't even know the word for it because that's the amount of money. They say these numbers and it has so many zeros. One only knows the zeros, but when you put a 1 before it, then you don't know what that number stands for. For the majority of the country, it's only zeros. But it's for these few families that then there's 1, 2, 3, 5, those numbers in front. But that is the farm laws. If you remember the farmers when they held their protest, everyone knows that Adani had already started buying godowns, warehouses 1 year before the laws were passed. They already knew it. The labor laws that have been replaced by the 4 codes, we all know that in 2014 itself, the CIA they had a wish list. In the wish list, they said they wanted fixed term employment, they didn't want minimum wages to be high, so on and so forth. And the central government has willy-nilly acceded to every single demand that they made. So it's a very different kind of corporate control that we're seeing at this juncture. And the third, of course, is the unprecedented communal polarization, which is commensurate with also with the Hindu radicalization. And the Muslim community is facing the brunt of this. The kind of things that are being said, the kind of hysteria that is being generated in society is unimaginable. I cannot imagine what it is for a Muslim to live in this country. And I'm saying this with a name like Clifton D. Rosario. So I think any of you with little Hindu sounding names, you could also try and imagine that. I think to some extent, I'm an atheist, and which is, so I think the church also really doesn't like me much. But of course the right wing doesn't like you much. But I can imagine, just imagine what it means when every single day, today as we are sitting here, 300 right-wing elements in Srirangapatna are trying to tear into the Jamia Masjid over there. As we are sitting, it's happening right now. There's a list of some 2,000 odd temples that these right-wing people have come out with, which say that these are all masjids that were, these were temples that were demolished and masjids were built. And they're going to reclaim every single one of them. So if Ram Mandir gave them 2014 and 2019, Gyan Vyapi is going to give them 2024. Can you imagine? They have 2,000 more down the pipeline. This is the kind of hatred that is being generated for the Muslims especially. And if you were to go to states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh for the Christian community, it is very, very concerning. So what democracy is the question that really one can pose at this point. I think the fourth element which we really cannot miss is the persecution of dissent and any kind of activism. Whether it is Bhima Koregaon, whether it is the anti-CAA protesters who are all sitting in jail even now in Delhi, any kind of dissent is, to the extent is incredible. I mean, you have an elected representative, an MLA, Jignesh Mevani, who's picked up by the Assam police and taken all the way to Assam. Now, Assam has become like this, the police has become, they can do anything for the central government. Previously, you'd remember that there were 2 journalists who went to report on the Tripura, on the violence against Muslims in Tripura. And both those journalists faced hell from the police over there. You'd also remember that at that same time, there was a bunch of advocates who went from Delhi, including one member of the organization I'm the General Secretary of, the All India Lawyers Association for Justice. They had UAPA cases filed against them. So you have a situation now that any voice against is something that will not be tolerated. Just a few days ago, we had our All India Lawyers Association Justice National Conference. Mr. B.T. Venkatesh, a very senior advocate, he was also there in that. And Mr. Mihir Desai had spoken about the role of advocates in the face of fascism. What is it that we can do? And interestingly, there were a bunch of advocates who came who were not from our circles. Senior counsel coming, let us go listen to him. After that, a couple of them came and asked us, how is it that he's speaking like this? Is he going to get arrested now? So this chilling effect, that's what I want to refer to. One is what the state does, but it's silencing now. It's silencing a large number of people from opening their mouths, and that I think is something that we really need to be concerned about. The next feature I think, which is something that we really should not miss, is that today there's a very new discourse on nationalism. Of course, it's religious nationalism, it's Hindutva. Today, if you go back to the emergency, India's Indra's India, we've come to a stage where the government is India, India is the government. There is no difference between the two. And that form of a nationalism, that does not augur well for us. And that is something that's a feature that we really need to keep in mind. And the last, I think, very compelling feature that separates out this particular phase of our country, of the history of our country, is the kind of mob injustice that we're seeing. It is totally permissible now for a bunch of hoodlums to gather together. You could break down the Babri Masjid in 1992, and today you can go into anybody's house. You can just walk in, you can threaten that person for having eaten beef, you can threaten that that person is converting somebody into Christianity, you can threaten them with anything, and then you can beat them, you can kill them. And the audacity is reached such extents that you will not only do that, you will videograph it. And you will ensure that it goes viral, because you know you're going to be rewarded. And of course you're rewarded, because you will get arrested. If you get arrested and you come out from jail, you know that the sitting MP is going to come and garland you. That is the reality. So when we talk about this, these fringe elements are going and doing this violence, I think let us not be confused here. The fringe is the center today. And it is because that what used to be the fringe has become the center. Any kind of violence by any of their organizations is something that is acceptable. So I just wanted to make this point that these essential features that separate out this particular juncture from the time when we were young and when Professor Mansur was working, I think let us recognize that and call it for what it is, because doing that will help us also frame ways that we go forward. I think we'll have a translation now.
I invite Shashank, a dear colleague, a friend of PUCL, and someone who has agreed to help us and volunteer with translating to Kannada for many, many, many events. Thank you, Shashank.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಇದೊಂಚೂರು ಬಹಳ ಭಯದ್ದು ಮತ್ತು ಕಷ್ಟದ ಕೆಲಸ, ಎರಡು ರೀಸನ್ಗಳಿಗೆ. ಒಂದು, ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಸರ್ ಅವರ ಹೆಸರು ತೊಗೊಂಡಿರೋದು. ನಾನು ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಬೆಳೆದಿಲ್ಲ, ನಾನು ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕಂಡಿಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಒಡನಾಟ ಹೊಂದಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಅವರಿಂದ ಕಲ್ತಂಥ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ನೋಡಿ ನಾವು ಕೂಡ ಕಲಿತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಇಬ್ಬರು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಸ್ಪೀಕರ್ಸ್, ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಭಯ ಮತ್ತು ಸಂಕೋಚ ಎರಡೂ ಇದೆ. ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಸೌಮ್ಯ ಸ್ವಭಾವಗಳನ್ನು ನೆನಪಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅಂದರೆ ಅವರು ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರಿಂಗ್ ಮೊದಲನೇ ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಫೈನಲ್ ಇಯರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರಿಂಗ್ ಓದ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಸರ್ ಜೊತೆ ಅವರ ಒಡನಾಟ ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನೆನಪಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರು. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಅವರು ಏನು ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಂತರು. ಒಂದು ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಚಿತ್ರಣ ಇವತ್ತು ಮತ್ತು ಅವತ್ತಿನ ದಿನಮಾನಗಳಿಗೆ ಏನು ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಒಂದು ಮೇಜರ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೊಂದಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಕೊಂಬೋಣ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಚಾಲೆಂಜ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಸವಾಲು ಅವತ್ತಿನ ಸವಾಲುಗಳಿಗೂ ಬಹಳ ಒಂದು ಅಜಗಜಾಂತರ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸಗಳಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡೋಣ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಒತ್ತಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಒಂದು 4-5 ಪಾಯಿಂಟನ್ನು ಮೇಜರ್ ಆಗಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನು ವಿವರಿಸ್ತಾ ಹೋದರು. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳೋಷ್ಟು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಂಗೆ ಅದನ್ನು ವಿವರಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗದೆ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ 75ನೇ ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಏನು ಅಮೃತ ಮಹೋತ್ಸವ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಕರಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಈ ಹಿಂದಿ ಹೇರಿಕೆಗಳು ಪದಗಳು ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಪದಗಳಾಗಿ ಇವಾಗ ರೂಪುಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಗಮನಿಸ್ತಾನೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಡೆಮಾಕ್ರಸಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು, ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ಚಳುವಳಿಯಿಂದ ಬಂದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಅರ್ಥೈಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೇವಲ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದೊಂದಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಹಂಚ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸಂಬಂಧ ಮಾತ್ರನ, ಹಾಗೇನಲ್ಲ. ನಾವು ಇಡೀ ಸಮಾಜ ಒಂದು ಹೇಗೆ ಸಂರಚನೆ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅದು ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಹೊಂದಿರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ಏನು ಇವತ್ತು ಹಲ್ಲೆಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಏನಿದೆ, ಅವರು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಡೆಫಿನೇಷನ್ ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅವರು. ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಅಂದರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ಗೆ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ ಬರೀ 5 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೊಮ್ಮೆ ನಡೆಯುವಂಥ ವೋಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅಥವಾ ಸಾಂವಿಧಾನಿಕ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ದಿನನಿತ್ಯ ನಾವು ಜೀವನದಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ಜೀವಿಸ್ತೀವ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನನಗೆ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಚೌಕಟ್ಟು ಹಾಕ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋದರು. ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಏನು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರ ಇದೆ, ಇವತ್ತಿನ BJP ರೆಜೀಮ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ ಹೋರಾಟದ ಚಳುವಳಿಯಿಂದ ಬಂದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ನಾವು ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರೋದನ್ನ ತಿರಸ್ಕರಿಸಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರನ ನಾವು ಮುನ್ನೆಲೆಗೆ ತರ್ತೀವಿ, ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರನ ಬೆಳೆಸ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದು ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರ್ಸಿಂದ ಹಿಡಿದು ಇಲ್ಲಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕರ್ತರವರೆಗೂ ಒಂದು ಏನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದು ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಮುಖ ಸವಾಲಾಗಿದೆ. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಏನು ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಟೈಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಲಾಕ್ಡೌನ್ನ ಡಿಕ್ಲೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಕೇವಲ 4 ಗಂಟೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಒಪ್ಪಿಗೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶವೇ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಥಗಿತಕ್ಕೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯನ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಮುನ್ನೆಲೆಗೆ ತರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಅಸಮಾನತೆ. ನಾವು ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲದನ್ನು ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇರಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯ ಅಸಮಾನತೆಗಳನ್ನು ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಅಸಮಾನತೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಹೋದರು. ಹಾಗೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ 2021 ಸೆಪ್ಟೆಂಬರ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಸರ್ವೆ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಂಥ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟನ್ನು ಮುನ್ನೆಲೆಗೆ ತರ್ತಾನೆ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇವಲ 277 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಒಬ್ಬ ಮನುಷ್ಯ ತನ್ನ ಜೀವನವನ್ನು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ರೂಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಥರ ಬರೀತಾರೆ. ಅದು ಇವತ್ತಿಗೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾ? ಆ ಸಾಧ್ಯತೆಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನಕ್ಕಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಎತ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಮತ್ತು BJP ಎರಡೂ ಏನು ಮೇಜರ್ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಪಕ್ಷಗಳೇನಿವೆ, ಆಡಳಿತದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಇರುವಂಥ ಪಕ್ಷಗಳು, ಎರಡು ಮಾಡ್ತಿರೋದು ಒಂದೇ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನು ಯೂಶುವಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಾಯಿ ಮಾತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದು ಹಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಅದು ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಹಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅವರು ಒತ್ತಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಇವತ್ತು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಸಪೋರ್ಟರ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ವಿರೋಧ ಇದೆಯೋ ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಿನ ತೀವ್ರತೆಯ ವಿರೋಧ ನಮಗೆ ಇವತ್ತು BJP ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟಪಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳೋದು, ಇವತ್ತು ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ನ ನಾವು ಅವರ ತಪ್ಪುಗಳಿಗೆ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬಿಡೋಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ, ಅಂದರೆ ಬರೀ ಅವರ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಪಕ್ಷವಾಗಿ ಆಡಳಿತದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದ ಕಾಲ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಛತ್ತೀಸ್ಗಢ, ಜಾರ್ಖಂಡ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಆಡಳಿತದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೋ ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಇದೇ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳೇ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆದರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋಂಥ 1-2-3 ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸಗಳು ಕಾಂಗ್ರೆಸ್ಗೂ BJP ರೆಜಿಮ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಇರೋಂಥ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು, ಕಾರ್ಪೊರೇಟ್ ಟೇಕ್ ಓವರ್. ಈ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಬಹುರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಕಂಪ್ನಿಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮನೆತನಗಳು, 4-5 ಮನೆತನಗಳಷ್ಟೇ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶದ ಆರ್ಥಿಕತೆಯನ್ನು ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮುಷ್ಟಿಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಹಿಂದೆ ಇರಲಿಲ್ವೇನೋ, ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಬಹಳ ಆಳವಾಗಿ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ಚೂರು ಕೂಡ ಏನು ಗೌರವವೇ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋಂಥ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ತಮಿಳ್ನಾಡು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರತಿರೋಧಗಳನ್ನ ಒಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರತಿರೋಧ ಒಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವೇ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಕೋಮು ಧ್ರುವೀಕರಣ, ಹಿಂದೆ ಇದು ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಇವತ್ತು ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ರೀತಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದು ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ಸ್ಕೇಲ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ಎಷ್ಟು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಇವತ್ತು ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯ ಕ್ರಿಶ್ಚಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರಲಿ, ಮುಸಲ್ಮಾನರಾಗಲಿ, ಯಾರೇ ಆಗಿರಲಿ, ಒಂದು ಬದುಕಲಿಕ್ಕೇನೆ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಿರೋಂಥ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮದೇ ಶ್ರೀರಂಗಪಟ್ಟಣದಲ್ಲಿ 300 ಜನ ಜಾಮಿಯಾ ಮಸ್ಜಿದ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂಥ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ, ಹಾಗೆ ಅವರು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಿಷಯನ ಮುಂದಿಟ್ಟರು. ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ 2000 ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನಗಳನ್ನ 2000 ಮಸೀದಿ ಚರ್ಚ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಪಟ್ಟಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಂದಿರಗಳಿತ್ತು ಅನ್ನೋ ಹೆಸರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಏನು ರಾಜಕಾರಣ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ, ಅದು 91-92ರಲ್ಲಿ ಅಯೋಧ್ಯೆ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತು. ಅದರ ಬೇಸಿಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ 2014 ಮತ್ತು 2019ರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು BJP ಅಧಿಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂತು, ಇನ್ನು 2000 ಲಿಸ್ಟ್ ಆ ಥರ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನು ಎಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ಈ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕೋಮು ಧ್ರುವೀಕರಣನ ಅನುಭವಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತಲೇ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ, ಹಾಗೆ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯತೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಒಂದು ಬೇರೆಯದೇ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದೆ. ಈ ಹಿಂದೆ ಇಂದಿರಾ ಅಂದರೆ ಭಾರತ, ಇಂದಿರಾ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಭಾರತ, ಭಾರತ ಅಂದರೆ ಇಂದಿರಾ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಏನಿತ್ತು, ಅದು ಇವತ್ತಿಗೆ ಬದಲಾಗಿ ಸರ್ಕಾರವೇ ಭಾರತ ಆಗೋಗಿದೆ, ಭಾರತ ಅಂದ್ರೇನೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಆಗೋಗಿದೆ. ಈ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂತಹ ಪ್ರತಿರೋಧಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಒಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಅದನ್ನ ಏನು ಪ್ರತಿರೋಧವನ್ನೇ ಮಟ್ಟ ಹಾಕ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಏನು ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ನಿಂತಿದೆ, ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳು ನಿಂತಿದೆ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಇನ್ನು ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಕೂಡ ಹೆದರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಮಾಬ್ ವೈಲೆನ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಪುಂಡ್ರ ಗುಂಪುಗಳು ಹೋಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲಂದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಗಲಾಟೆಗಳನ್ನು ತೆಗೆದು ಅದು ನಾವು ಗಲಾಟೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಶೇಮ್, ಒಂದು ಅಸಹ್ಯ ಕೂಡ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಭಾವನೆಗಳೇ ಇಲ್ದೇನೆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರದೋ ಮನೆಗೆ ನುಗ್ಗಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಹೆಸರಲ್ಲಿ ನುಗ್ಗಿ ಗಲಾಟೆ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಇದು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಿಷಯನ ತರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಮುಂಚೆ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಸೈಡ್ ಲೈನ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪುಂಡ್ರು ಗುಂಪುಗಳೇ ಇವತ್ತು ರಾಜ್ಯವನ್ನು ಆಳಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ 4-5 ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಮುಂದೆ ಸಾಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಈ 5 ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳದೆ ಹೋದರೆ ಪ್ರತಿ ಸತಿನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮಗೆ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಗುರುತಿಸೋದ್ರಲ್ಲೇ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ದಾರಿಗಳನ್ನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಳ್ಳೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಹುಷಾರಾಗಿ ನೋಡಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಇಲ್ಲಿವರೆಗೂ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು.
Before I move to the next part, there's just one, actually there's this very interesting book by Rukmini S, Whole Numbers and Half Truths, What Data can and cannot tell us about modern India. In this book, one of the chapters, she looks at society and the kind of views that are prevalent. And what she finds is this, and I'll just read out 2-3 points. One is that Indians have held fairly conservative views about how the country should be governed in broad terms. There's a lower commitment to democratic principles than most other major countries. Indian respondents had an even lower regard than Pakistani respondents for civil rights that protect people's liberty against oppression as being an essential part of the democracy. And here, Indian respondents expressed greater support for a strong leader and for army rule than most other countries and the global average. Now, I think the question that really I would think about over here is that why has this come to be? Why is it that these notions of democracy, why hasn't it been internalized? Why isn't it spread in society? And I think that's something that we really need to think about. In fact, Baba Sahib says at one point, when in one of his speeches about entering into an age of contradictions, where you have political equality, which is one person, one vote, but there is no social and economic equality. And if you don't get that, then this will destroy the entire base of this democracy. I think somewhere we really need to think about that. And in our work, what we find is, especially with workers, if you are going to spend 10 to 12 hours of the day working just to make ends meet, and after that you have to go, you have to take care of your family, you live in situations where there is no security at all, wage security, job security, no living conditions that are human. How much can that person participate in a democracy? I think that's a question that we really need to pose for ourselves. And here I think there are 2-3 struggles that I'd like to talk about, which we've been part of. Do Saraswati is over here. She's the person who is really the reason why I'm still involved with the sanitation workers. When I returned from Narmada, part of Narmada Bachao Andolan many years ago, at that point, along with her, we did work with Paurakarmikas. Paurakarmikas or sanitation workers are almost entirely Dalit. 90% women, and obviously all of them poor. At the time we began a union, they were getting paid around 500 or 600 rupees, 900 rupees per month. And this was being paid to those workers who were protecting the health of every single citizen in the city of Bangalore. And because they were Dalit, they were not allowed, and because they were working with garbage, they were not allowed near anybody's house. So when we started our union, I remember in the beginning we'd go and we'd try to have meetings in the muster where the workers gathered together, and they'd run away because they'd say, if they see us talking to you, we will lose our jobs. And some people did lose their jobs. Over a period of time, over many years, the organization was built, the union was formed, and many struggles took place. And what were the struggles that took place? The first thing was about dignity, about social dignity. I was most happiest when once one of the workers, she called me up and she said, comrade, ಇವತ್ತೊಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಕೆಲಸ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತು. ಏನಪ್ಪ ಏನಾಯ್ತಮ್ಮ? ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಮ ಗುಡಿಸ್ನಾರ್ನಲ್ಲ sorry, she said that a very big thing happened today. So, okay, what happened? She said, I was sweeping in the morning and this lady, big Bangla lady, she called me and she gave me dal and rice in a plastic cover to eat. And she said, oh, poor lady, you come from 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, you've been sweeping the streets, you please eat this. So then this worker said, I asked her, who lives in your house? Who all are there in your house? She said, my husband has passed away. I have one son, he's a software engineer. So then I asked her, where is your son now? She said, my son is gone night duty. He will come back sometime in the morning. So, comrade, I told her, you keep this in the fridge and feed your son when he comes back. I will fight for what's due to me, and I will take it. Now, when I think these struggles, the process of democratization, if at all it's happened in this country, is not because of the government or these ruling parties. It is despite them. And it is these struggles that have actually made. So for us to look at a worker struggle as being economic issues, it really isn't. It is a fight to save democracy because it is the right to organize, it's the right to express, and it's the right to express dissent and to claim, to make a stake that in this country, I am also due certain things. And I think that these struggles that we see across the country, these are where you find hope. So while on the one hand, of course, things look really dismal, and I'll come to that. Sometimes I find it quite hilarious when somebody tells me, it's so hopeless, and I've just had a meeting with PUCL-Karnataka who are working from 5:30 to 2:30. None of them are saying it's hopeless. They're really trying to change their life. So, just get over it. Hopelessness is the sense of despair. Sometimes I feel it's a privilege that we can really let pass. I think if you were to look at the recent past, especially, two struggles that are standout, and I would say that these are the standout struggles not just for their own issues, but in defense of a democratic dream for this country. At the forefront, I think, is the Muslim community. So when this government thought that it can bring in an amendment to the Citizenship Act and reduce citizenship to something that will be based on religion, an entire community stood up against them, the Muslim community. The second, I think, were the farmers. 1 year of such a historic struggle on the borders of Delhi, which compelled this government to withdraw those 3 farm laws. Hundreds of farmers, I think around 800 farmers, 700 to 800 farmers who lost their lives in that 1 year sitting at those borders. Now that fight was not just about just getting the 3 laws repealed. What were those 3 laws? The subject on the basis of which the subject is in the constitution, you have the 7th schedule, you have list number 1, list number 2, list number 3, the union list, state list, and the concurrent list. Normally agriculture is something which the union government doesn't have power to make laws for, but it made it. It was an attack on federalism. Then the manner in which they bulldozed it through, the manner in which they pushed it through in parliament, literally rendered the parliament it's just a space now where some of these people are sitting. There is no discussion. There are no laws that are being discussed over there. It's a mockery of parliamentary democracy in that sense. But the farmers stood up, and when they said that this Adani and Ambani, this Adani Ambani Raj, that used to be the slogan over there. That was a fight for democracy. That was a fight to save the democratic dream of this country. And all of us, I would say, we really owe it to them for taking the struggle up to them. I think little closer, I was telling you also about our own PUCL-Karnatakas in this state and the fights that they have fought for social dignity. It's never been a fight only to make us permanent. It's never been a fight only to get us better wages. It's always been a fight for dignity, for equality, and fraternity. It's about how people are going to treat you. I think all of these struggles, and right now in Bangalore, just to inform you, there's a struggle that has been going on now for more than 6 months, where workers of ITI, which is the first public sector undertaking in our state, 80 workers who were stopped from their work on 1st of December last year till today sit and strike over there. It's a 24/7 struggle which they are doing over there, and in that struggle, they are incredible, these workers. So they have celebrated Fatima Sheikh's Janamdin. They have celebrated Savitribai Phule Jayanti over there. They have celebrated Baba Saheb Ambedkar Jayanti over there. They have also protested against all communal polarization that is happening over there. While they are outside, they have lost their jobs. They are on minimum wages. They are not permanent workers. They are on minimum wages. But despite that, Kuvempu Jayanti. See, and when you look at who's giving them the support to this particular struggle is coming from students, friends who are sitting over here and the middle over there, who've been there almost every single week supporting those workers. The support has come in from the farmer organizations who came out and rally over there to support these workers. Support has also come from a lot of friends over here. In fact, Malini is over here, who is the author of a very good fact-finding report on what the conditions of these workers are. So I think it's in our hands the way struggles actually can get transformed into struggles that are much more than just the immediate issues. And each of these examples, I would say, is something that we give. And one particular instance I have to talk about, and B.T. Venkatesh, Arvind, I think Shilpa, Lekha, friends over here, they were all petitioners in this. I hope I have not missed out any of the petitioners. The Hubli case. This was, I think, just before the lockdown happened. 3 Kashmir kids who are studying engineering in Hubli were arrested and they were charged under sedition. The allegation against them was that there is a song playing, and in that song, some Kashmir Zindabad is said, and apparently they also mouthed it. So for that, they are arrested, not just arrested, they were beaten up by the right wing, then arrested, thrown into jail. And the Bar Association in Hubli Dharwad took a decision that they will not let any advocate represent them. And our friends over here, Arvind, B.T. Venkatesh is in fact petition number 1 in that. They gathered together almost 32 lawyers from our bar who filed a PIL in the High Court saying that every single person, any accused, is entitled to legal representation. And they succeeded. And because of them, those students got bail. Not only bail, those students now have got their education because they couldn't go back and continue the engineering over there. Their education is continuing in Bangalore. Their scholarship is continuing in Bangalore. But that's because of the courage of all of them. And at that point, V.T. Venkatesh should remember in court when the matter was being argued, you'd have a bunch of these right-wing advocates and they're crazily organized. The right-wing advocates are more organized than any of us. They would be sitting at the back muttering, Yuri and Appa, why are they fighting the cases of these anti-nationals? These are 18, 19-year-old kids, who have, whether they've done, not done, really, that's not the point. But you'd had this entire bunch who was sitting in court and of course cursing B.T. Venkatesh as being the ringleader of this group of young leaders. But see, this is a small example, and the reason I wanted to share this with you all is some of the big fights are really not known. Some of these fights are happening on an everyday basis, and you have a large number of people, nameless people, who are really fighting this battle to say that, let's save the future of this country. And I really take, great pride in saying that I know some of these people who are taking those risks. I was coming back to, like I said, this point on hope. One really hears this too many times now that, things are so, it's so despairing, really nothing can happen now. We can't change things. I have a very ahistorical way of looking at things. Things have been bad, but things have improved. If there was a Hitler and he could garner the kind of army that he wanted, rule for the 10 years that he could, but he still got defeated. If there's a Donald Trump that came to power, he got defeated. You look at Putin, you look at any of these people, you go back in history. The point is that we can't stop resisting. The point is that there are certain ideals for which all of us stand, and those are worth taking the risks for. And I think there are enough number of people taking that risk. And one of them, of course, is our favorite quote, which Arvind and me really like. Varavar Rao says, and I'd like to read this paragraph. This, I think, is, with great respect, paying tribute to all the political prisoners whose lives are being, wasted in the prisons from whether it's in Delhi in the anti-CA cases, or whether it's Bhima Koregaon or anywhere else in this country, or those in Kerala. Political prisoners know the meaning of hope, but they do not know the meaning of despair. Chera called me a frightful optimist for this, and yet I must honestly admit that although I have known pain, suffering and anxiety along with hope, happiness and enthusiasm, never have I been plunged into despair and frustration, even in the most trying times. In personal matters, I have felt a sorrowful indifference at moments and said, let troubles and hardships come if they must. I have felt detachment, but I have never yielded into cynicism even for a moment in my solitary cell. This courage, I think this is the kind of courage, this is the inspiration I think that we all require in this time when it feels like this is a hopeless battle. That this is just too far gone. We are too weak, we are too divided, we are not ideologically strong, we are not politically, our understanding is not up to it. I think at times like this, we really need to look at this. And what Umar says, I think this is something that I really like. Umar Khalid said, one of the facets of the fight against fascism is that you must learn to be happy, because isn't that exactly what they don't want? It's incredible. And this he writes, not sitting in the comforts of his home. This he writes sitting in Tihar jail. And this is his message to all of us. So I would say, there is no space for hopelessness. There is absolutely no space for despair. And I would say there is actually hope. There is space for hope and action. If the farmers could achieve it, if our Paura Karmikas could achieve it, if ITI workers have that courage, and numerous, hundreds and thousands of people across this country, whether they are Muslim, or whether it's the farmers, the workers, they are all standing up to this regime. So I would say let us take hope in that, and let us join hands. That I think is the way forward. You want to translate and then I'll conclude.
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದೆ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆರಾಮಾಗಿ ಕೇಳೋದೇ ಚೆನ್ನ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟದ ಕೆಲಸ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರೋದು. ಬಹಳ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ 2-3 ವಿಷಯನ ಈ ಸತಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಒಂದು, ರುಕ್ಮಿಣಿ ಅವರ ಬುಕ್ ಒಂದನ್ನ ಕೋಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ವಾಟ್ ನಂಬರ್ಸ್, ಹೋಲ್ ನಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಹಾಫ್ ಟ್ರೂತ್ಸ್ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವಿವತ್ತಿರೋಂಥ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿನ ಒಂದು ಸಾಂಖ್ಯಿಕವಾಗಿ ಕಟ್ಕೊಡೋಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶ ಹೇಗ್ ನಡಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಏನು ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೀವಿ ಅದು ಇನ್ನೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಂದು ಸಂಕುಚಿತ ಭಾವನೆಗಳಲ್ಲೇ ಅಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ಬೇರೆ ದೊಡ್ಡ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರೋಂಥ ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಹಳ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇದೆ. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನದ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ, ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ಅವರು ಡೇಟಾನ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂಥ ಜನರುಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಲಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್, ಭಾರತೀಯರಿಂದ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಬಂದಂಥ ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿವಿಲ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಲಿಬರ್ಟಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಇದು ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಒಂದು ಅತ್ಯಗತ್ಯ ಭಾಗ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಪರಿಭಾವಿಸೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನು. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಈಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಇನ್ನೂ ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ನಾಯಕ ಬೇಕು, ಇನ್ನೂ ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾದಂಥ ಒಂದು ನಾಯಕ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾನೆ ನಾವು ಈಗಲೂ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಇದು ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರಗಳ ಒಂದು ಆವ್ರೇಜ್ ಕಂಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತಲೂ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಘಟನೆನ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್. ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಂಗೆ ಪೌರ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರ ಏನು ಚಳುವಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಹಳ ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ನಡೆಸ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಘಟನೆನ ಅವ್ರು ಜ್ಞಾಪಿಸ್ಕೊಂತಾರೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಏನು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಲೇಡಿ ಬಂದು ಪೌರ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರೊಬ್ಬರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಚೀಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಕ್ಕಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನ ಸಾಂಬಾರು ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಇವರು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೇಲಿ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಇಲ್ಲ, ಗಂಡ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮಗ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರ್, ಅವನು ಆಫೀಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಹಂಗಿದ್ರೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಫ್ರಿಜ್ಜಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ಅವ್ರು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಗ ಬಂದಾಗ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅವನಿಗೆ ತಿಳಿಸಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರಂತೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಎಂಫಸೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಒತ್ತು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು ಯಾವ ವಿಚಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಇದು ಕೇವಲ ಒಂದು ವೇಜ್ಗೆ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಬಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋಂಥ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲ, ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಚಳುವಳಿಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋವಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಘನತೆಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರಕ್ಕೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಅವರು ಒತ್ತಿ ಒತ್ತಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಇನ್ನೆರಡು ಚಳುವಳಿಗಳು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನಡೆದಂಥವು ಯಾವುದರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಕಲಿಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಅವರ ಹಿತಾಸಕ್ತಿಗಳನ್ನು ಮಾತ್ರ ಮುಂದಕ್ಕಿಡ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಆದರೆ ಇಡೀ ದೇಶದ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಜಾಸತ್ತ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳೇನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮುನ್ನೆಲೆಗೆ ತಂದಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ಎರಡು ಫೈಟ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಬೇಕು, ಇದೆರಡು ಚಳುವಳಿಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಬೇಕು. ಒಂದು CAA ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಇಡೀ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಮುದಾಯ ಎದ್ದು ನಿಂತು ಇದು ನನ್ನದು ದೇಶ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗುಂಪುಗಳು ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜನರು ಕೂಡ ಏನು ಒಟ್ಟುಗೂಡಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಧ್ವನಿಗೂಡಿಸಿದ್ದು. ಎರಡನೇದಾಗಿ ರೈತರ ಚಳವಳಿ 1 ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ 700-800 ರೈತರು ತೀರ್ ಹೋಗ್ತಾರೆ ಆ ಇಡೀ ಚಳುವಳಿ ನಡೀತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ. ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇವರೆಲ್ಲರೂ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದು ಅವರ ಏನೋ ಒಂದು 3 ಫಾರ್ಮುಲಾನ ಹಿಂತಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದ್ರ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇರುವಂತ ಒತ್ತಾಸೆ ಏನು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಘನತೆಗೆ, ಸಮಾನತೆಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಭ್ರಾತೃತ್ವಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಎದ್ದು ನಿಂತಿರೋದು. ಇದರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಒಂಥರ ಹತಾಶೆಗೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಯ್ಯೋ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೋ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಹೊಡೆದೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೀವಿ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸೈದ್ಧಾಂತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಗಟ್ಟಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಅಥವಾ ನಾವು ಇನ್ನೇನ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಕೂತ್ ಬಿಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಹಾಗೆ ಕೂರುವಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ 1-2-3 ದಿನನಿತ್ಯದ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗಲ್ಗಳ, ದಿನನಿತ್ಯದ ಚಳುವಳಿಗಳ 1-2-3 ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ಸ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ITI ಏನು ಪ್ರಪ್ರಥಮ ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ಸಹಭಾಗಿತ್ವ ಕಂಪನಿ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಅದರಿಂದ ಟರ್ಮಿನೇಟ್ ಆಗಿರುವಂತ ವರ್ಕರ್ಸ್ 6 ತಿಂಗಳಿಂದ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತು ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ ಯೂನಿಯನ್ಸ್, ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ಸ್ಗಳೇ. ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತು ಕುವೆಂಪು ಅವರ ದಿನಾಚರಣೆನ ಆಚರಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತು ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಜಯಂತಿನ ಆಚರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ, ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತು ಫಾತಿಮಾ ಶೇಖ್ ಅವರ ಹುಟ್ಟುಹಬ್ಬ ಜನ್ಮದಿನನ ಆಚರಿಸ್ಕೋತಾರೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗಿರೋವಂಥದ್ದು, ಅವ್ರಿಗಿರೋಂಥ ಭರವಸೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾಕಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಮುನ್ನೆಲೆಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೇನೆ ಹುಬ್ಳಿಲಿ ನಡೆದಂತ ಒಂದು ಘಟನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಸೆಡಿಷನ್ ಲಾನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಸ್ ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವಾಗ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಬಾರ್ ಅಸೋಸಿಯೇಷನ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಾವು ಈ ಪೆಟಿಷನ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೂ ಅವರ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಯಾರು ಕೂಡ ಹೋಗಿ ವಾದ ಮಾಡೋ ಹಂಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಡಿಸಿಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಹೆಸರಾಗಿರುವಂತ BT ವೆಂಕಟೇಶ್ವರು, ಅರವಿಂದ್, ಲೇಖ, ಹಾಗೆ ಇನ್ನೂ 32 ಜನ ಸೇರಿ ಒಂದು ಪಿಟಿಷನ್ ಬರೆದು ಆರ್ಡರ್ನ ಹಿಂಪಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರದಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳು ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಬುಕ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಆ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕರಣ ದಾಖಲಾಗಿಸಿತ್ತು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಸಾಂಗ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅವರು ಪ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರ್ ಜಿಂದಾಬಾದ್ ಅಂತ ಪದಗಳಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಹಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದ ಸೆಡಿಷನ್ ಕೇಸು ಹಾಕಿ ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ಆಂಟಿ ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್, ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ದೇಶದ್ರೋಹಿಗಳು ಅಂತ ಏನು ಒಂದು ನರೇಟಿವ್ನ ಕಟ್ಟಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂದಾಗತ್ತೆ ರೈಟ್ ವಿಂಗ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ಸ್. ಅದರ ವಿರುದ್ಧದ ದಿನನಿತ್ಯದ ಫೈಟ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕಾನೂನು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆನ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಯ್ತು. ಈ ರೀತಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ 2 ಘಟನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಇದು ದಿನನಿತ್ಯ ನಡೆಯುವಂತ ಚಳವಳಿ, ಇದು ಕೇವಲ ಯಾವತ್ತೋ ಒಂದು ಸತಿ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯೋದಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಯಾವತ್ತೂ ಹತಾಶೆಗಳು ಆಗೋದು ಬೇಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಭರವಸೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮುನ್ನಡೆದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು. ಆ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಪಠ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ಉಲ್ಲೇಖಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್. ಒಂದು ವರವರ ರಾವ್ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು, ಒಂದು ಉಮರ್ ಖಲೀದ್. ಇಬ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತು ಜೈಲ್ಗಳಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಪ್ರಿಸನರ್ಸ್ ಆಗೇ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ನಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ರಿಂದ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ. ಬಟ್ ಒಂದು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ಇವಾಗ ನಡೀತಾ ಬಂದಿರೋದು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಕೆಟ್ಟ ಗಳಿಗೆಗಳು ಕೂಡ ಹೋಗ್ತವೆ, ಇನ್ನೂ ನಾವು ಬೆಳಕಿನಡೆಗೆ ನಡೀತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಭರವಸೆನ ಈ 2 ಪಠ್ಯಗಳು ನೀಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು.
think I just missed out one point when I spoke about the Kashmir case. I think my colleague Maitri is here. Yeah. So the court actually said no lawyer from Hubli agreed to represent these 3 students. So Maitri and another friend of ours, Niyaz, Rajesh, 3 of them, they went from Bangalore. And the High Court passed an order that, okay, these advocates are going to go and they can represent them there. So when they go to the court to file their wakalat and their bail application, they are gerawed and heckled by more than 100 right-wing lawyers. They are called ISI agents, they are called Pakistan agents, and of course the language gets extremely colorful then in terms of how they start abusing them. After they file the wakalat and they come out, their car is stoned. And the back windshield, the back glass of the car is broken in stone pelting by these advocates. Only because they went there and they represented. So I was just trying to say that, see, the inspiration is the copy of the FIR. That's all. Only for that job. So there's inspiration all around us if we really want to start looking for it. Despair is of course always there, but I think we don't need to go around looking for that. I'll move towards the conclusion. So like I said, in my understanding, democracy is really not just about these constitutions, it's really not just about institutions, it's not about elections, it's about a democratic development of the people. That, in effect and in essence, is the way I understand it. And I would imagine my learning also from Professor Mansur may have been probably this, the value for every single human being, irrespective of who that person is. And here I think, I just like to remind all of us of what Baba Sahib actually says. He says that the roots of democracy lie not in the form of government, parliamentary or otherwise. A democracy is more than a form of government. It is primarily a mode of associated living. The roots of democracy are to be searched in the social relationship, in the terms of associated life between the people who form a society. It's as simple as that if it comes down to it. But it is just this. It is exactly this that is being hit. About who you are going to associate yourself with. Who is worthy of association. And I think that when it's going to be a regulation at such a level, it is something that we really have to take extremely seriously. And I think more than Baba Sahib Ambedkar in fact cautioned us at that time itself that if the Hindu Raj were to ever become a reality, no bigger calamity could have befallen us. And we are living in the Hindu Rashtra today. And that calamity has actually befallen us. But I think, how do we go from here? I'd like to, speak a little bit about that and then I'll conclude. I've already spoken about some of the struggles that have already taken place, that are taking place. That necessarily has to happen and there's no two ways about it. But here I draw inspiration from Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh actually in 1927, he writes this one essay on fighting communalism. And it's a very nice essay, and he actually talks about this particular union in Calcutta when faced with communal rights. It's not only that they don't participate in the communal rights, they step in the middle and they try to stop it. So he says, and he writes, he says this: if there is one lasting solution to these communal rights, it lies in the improvement of the economic conditions of Hindustan. Class consciousness is crucial to stop people from fighting each other. The poor workers and peasants should be made to clearly understand that their real enemies are the capitalists, so they must not fall into that trap. All the poor people of the world, whatever their caste, race, religion or nation, have the same rights. It is in your interest that all discrimination on account of religion, color, race and nationality is eliminated and the power of the government be taken in your hands. These efforts will not harm you in any way, but will one day cut off your shackles and you will get economic freedom. Bhagat Singh and Ambedkar, who I have extensively quoted here, are the two people whose posters will be put up even by this particular regime. So the manner in which they make a mockery of democracy, they will also make a mockery of Baba Sahib Ambedkar and Bhagat Singh. And I think that is a very, very unkind cut which is very difficult to digest. But no, coming to what Bhagat Singh said, this was written in 1927. The RSS was formed 2 years before, in 1925. 2025, they are going to celebrate their centenary. So what we see is nothing by accident. This ideology has been there for the last 20 years and they've been implementing it in various ways. Congress has not been any kind of a saint in this. RSS has had its elements even in the Congress. On the economic and caste question, I don't think one can find too many differences between these organizations. But the point is that the RSS has, for implementing its particular agenda, its ideology, it's built a mass of organizations over the last 100 years, and it feels that it's arrived at that time where it can implement it. So the manner and the disgraceful way in which Article 370 was abrogated was not just an attack on the whatever little autonomy the Kashmiris were promised when India got freedom. It was an attack on federalism. So I think at this juncture, we cannot just talk about class consciousness. Of course, it's absolutely essential. But I think Hindu radicalization, especially of the youth, is a reality. The communal polarization is a reality. That is also something that we really need to fight. And I feel that one of the things that we really cannot close our eyes to is the manner in which caste has become so much entrenched now. The kind of caste violence that is taking place, and it's getting entrenched structurally in that sense. So I feel that any kind of a battle, which is a battle, we are in a battle now, any battle to save democracy in this country necessarily has to have annihilation of caste as one of its key components. That is something that cannot be escaped. A lot of friends actually, talk to us and discussions, a lot of concern about what's going to happen to the Muslims. Somewhere maybe one or two Christians will ask what's going to happen to us. A lot of people say that genocide also may happen in this country, and it's definitely an extremely frightening prospect. But in my opinion, the blueprint for what can be done in subjugating a community in this country is already ready. And we only need to look at what has happened to the Dalit community. Article 17 prohibits untouchability. You will find it in village after village, and you'll not only just find it, you'll find it in various forms. In every village you go to, some of our friends over here who have worked with the Dalit communities for years, you will find that the double tumbler system exists. Dalits are not allowed to sit in that ur katte, what do you call that in English? The center of the village where they have a big tree and there's this place where everyone sits around it. You're not allowed to sit over there. You're not allowed to go to the barber shop in your village. In the hotel, the chai ka dukan which sells tea in that village of yours, there will be a separate entrance for you where you'll have to stand outside. Tea will be served to you in plastic glasses, but in steel glasses to the dominant caste people. You're not allowed into the temples, so on and so forth. The ways in which untouchability is practiced is now increasing. But untouchability is not just the only form in which caste manifests itself. It manifests itself in various other ways. And I think today, when you see the situation, for instance, Paurakarmikas, why is it that 100% of them belong to the Dalit community? It's because caste is associated with the profession. And that's how it is in this country. So the project to fight fascism, annihilation of caste alongside everything else, has to be a core component. And it's only then, I think to some extent, what I was saying, is this dream, this democratic dream that these fighters, these freedom fighters had for our country. Maybe to some extent we'll be able to save it. I'd like to end with this poem. It's this and Abib Jalib. Gorakh Pandey and Abib Jalib are my really go-to people whenever I feel a little low once in a while. So what Gorakh Pandey writes is this, and of course it's in Hindi. वो डरते हैं किस चीज़ से वो डरते हैं वे डरते हैं किस चीज़ से डरते हैं वे तमाम धन दौलत गोला बारूद पुलिस फौज के बावजूद वो डरते हैं कि एक दिन निहत्ते और गरीब लोग उनसे डरना बंद कर देंगे. And that is the fear that they have, that people are going to overcome their fear and they are going to stand up to this what looks like a behemoth, what looks like this unstoppable machine. This machine, it's a machine. And like every other machine, it definitely will conquer at some time. And that, I think, is the kind of job that is there for all of us. Thank you.
ಈ ಸತಿ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ನೆನಪಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದು ಹುಬ್ಳಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಕರಣದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವ್ರು ಬಿಟ್ಟದಂತ ಒಂದು ಅಂಶ. ಅದೇನು ಅಂದರೆ 3 ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ಪ್ರಕರಣ ದಾಖಲಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಆ ಪ್ರಕರಣದ ಒಂದು FIR ಕಾಪಿನ ಇಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂತ ಹುಬ್ಳಿಲಿರೋಂಥ ಯಾವುದೇ ವಕೀಲರು ಆ ಕೇಸನ್ನು ಕೈಗೊಳ್ಳದೇ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಮೈತ್ರಿ, ನಿಯಾಜ್ ಮತ್ತು ರಾಜೇಶ್ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಿಂದ ಹೊರಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿ ಪ್ರಕರಣದ FIR ಕಾಪಿ ಇಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರೋ ಅಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ಏನು ರೈಟ್ ವಿಂಗ್ ಬಲಪಂಥೀಯ ವಕೀಲರು ಏನಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿಕೊಂಡು ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಗೆರಾವ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಾದ ನಂತರ ಇವ್ರು ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಂಥ ಕಾರ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಕಲ್ಲುಗಳನ್ನು ತೂರಾಡಿ ಅದ್ರ ವಿಂಡ್ಶೀಲ್ಡ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಮುರಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಇದು ಅವರಲ್ಲಿರುವಂಥ ವಕೀಲರು. ಇನ್ನು ಬೇರೆ ಗುಂಪುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಾತನಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋದು ಬೇಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ಈ ಇಡೀ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕನ್ಕ್ಲೂಷನ್ ನೀಡ್ತಾ ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಂಥ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಗೆ ಅವರು ವಾಪಸ್ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ. ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ, ನನಗೆ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಅಂದರೆ ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಮತ್ತು ಅದರ ಅಂಗಸಂಸ್ಥೆಗಳು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಜನರ ಪ್ರಜಾತಾಂತ್ರಿಕ ಬೆಳವಣಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರತಿ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗೂ ನಾವು ನೀಡಬೇಕಾದಂಥ ಗೌರವ ಮತ್ತು ಘನತೆಯನ್ನು ಒಳಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾಗ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅದು ನನಗೆ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟಪಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅವರು ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಾ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಭಗತ್ ಸಿಂಗ್ರ ವಾಕ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ ನೆನಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ಉಲ್ಲೇಖಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಕೂಡ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವದ ಬೇರೂರಿರೋದು ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ಅಥವಾ ಆಡಳಿತ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಸಂರಚನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೂರ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಏನಾದರೂ ಅಕಸ್ಮಾತ್ ನಿಜವಾಗಿ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅದೇ ಈ ದೇಶದ ಅತಿ ದೊಡ್ಡ ದುರಂತ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಹೇಳಿರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ನೆನಪಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್. 1927ರಲ್ಲಿ ಭಗತ್ ಸಿಂಗ್ರು ಒಂದು ಲೇಖನನ ಬರೀತಾರೆ, ಫೈಟಿಂಗ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಲಿಸಮ್ ಅಥವಾ ಕೋಮುವಾದನ ಹೋರಾಡುವುದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಥವಾ ಅದನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲವಾಗಿಸುವುದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ತಗೊಳ್ಬೋದು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಅಂಶ ಏನು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಯಾವುದೇ ಕೋಮುವಾದ ಬೆಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕತೆಯೇ ಒಂದು ಮೂಲ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಅಸಮಾನತೆಯ ಮೂಲ. ಅದು ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋ ನಾವು ಜನರಿಗೆ ಆರ್ಥಿಕ ಸಮಾನತೆನ ಕಟ್ಟಿಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗೋವರೆಗೂ ನಾವು ಕೋಮುವಾದನ ಮಣಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ 1925ರಲ್ಲಿ ಶುರು ಆದಂಥ RSS ಇವಾಗ ಇನ್ನೇನು 3 ವರ್ಷಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು 100 ವರ್ಷಗಳನ್ನು ಆಚರಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಟೈಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಸಾವಿರಾರು ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳ ಮೂಲಕ ಅವರು ಬಹಳ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಬಟ್ ತಪ್ಪು ಕೆಲಸಗಳನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲದರಲ್ಲೂ ಇವಾಗ ಅವರು 100 ವರ್ಷದ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಏನ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ನಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾನೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವಿಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಇವಾಗ ಫ್ಯಾಸಿಸಂ ವಿರುದ್ಧದ ಹೋರಾಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾತಿ ವಿನಾಶ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಮೊದಲನೇ ಆದ್ಯತೆ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೇಕಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣ್ಯ ಅಥವಾ ಜಾತೀಯತೆನ ಹೋರಾಡದೆ ನಾವು ಇಡೀ ಫ್ಯಾಸಿಸಮ್ನ ಹೋರಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯವೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗೊರಖ್ ಪಾಂಡೆ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಡರ್ ಪದ್ಯನ ಅವರು ಉಲ್ಲೇಖಿಸ್ತಾರೆ.
I think you'll all agree that we had a very absolutely compelling presentation by Clifton, and really drew upon his strengths, both in terms of the kind of practice and the kind of practical related work that he's done, both as a movement organizer, as an advocate in the courts, as well as a thinker and reflector upon these issues. You would have seen the compelling references to both Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh, as well as, the people around us who are doing the kind of incredible work that he spoke about. Of course, Clifton being Clifton, he forgot to mention that in all of these cases, he's very often been at the center point of all these cases. And it's not just the other people he mentioned who were there, but he was very much a part of all these cases that were really taken forward. And I think the other quality which I think we'll all really appreciate, I think which he addressed really compellingly and very, very powerfully, is the fact that today, if there is that sense of a despair, his entire point is you can't despair. And he's saying you can't despair, not based on an abstract thing of sitting in an ivory tower saying that you can't despair. He's saying you can't despair based on the kind of practice-related level, based on the fact that these are the people you're interacting with, based on the fact that these are the struggles you're a part of. So I think that's a very compelling lesson for all of us to take in our own context, in the people we interact with, saying that, despair is really not an option. But I think on that point I will stop and leave it to everybody here. Clifton, please come on stage over here. It's not much of a stage.
The stage has reached.
It's a minor stage. But if any questions, thoughts, reflections, please feel free to come, to join me.
In the last 1 week, I received 2 emails. After that, my mind was on fire. We are doing a great job in the name of that great person who lived and worked in Bangalore very well. The first email I got was from the greatest democracy on earth. Greatest democracy on earth. The man who presided over that. He says in an email to me, I am sick and tired. The second one was from this office, defending democracy. I thought, what kind of democracy do we have here in this country? So these are the 2 questions disturbing my mind 1 week. Now, who will change this? I have an answer. When I went to Sri Lanka a few years ago to make an anthropological study, I met a 14-year-old girl in a small village called Ravanaguda. Remember the name, Ravanaguda, 400 miles away from Colombo. I was curious why this name Ravanaguda came. So the director of the museum helped me to go there and find out. There I spent the whole day and night in that village. I want to ask them, why do you give the name Ravanaguda? A 14-year-old girl gets up and asks me a question. You fellows from India, she told me, you fellows from India, why are you telling lies, 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 lies to your own children for hundreds of years? I said to her, you are my guru. She has given an answer. We all know what we have done. You have done a wonderful job. I listened to the talks. So many ideas came. And the answer, second answer for the largest democracy of the world is our farmers have shown last 1 year ago. These are the 2 answers. The 14-year-old girl from Sri Lanka and this farmers movement in India. We have the answer. And the last point, November 6th, 2019, morning 10 o'clock, I landed in Beijing. At the time, I was wearing white shirt, very cold. The driver who came to pick me up from Beijing airport, he said, don't you feel cold? I said, yes. But he took his jacket, white, fluffy jacket, and put it on me. I was happy. He said, you must enjoy here. After 3 days, when I was leaving for Shanghai, at the airport, I took the jacket and gave it back to him. He did not take it back. He said to me, no, you keep it with you as a symbol of civilization. He says to me, that is the answer now to our question. India and China have the greatest civilizations on earth. And together, we have to make a new human civilization. Now, the task is ours. Is it possible? Thank you so much.
I just have one question. How do we realistically and practically annihilate caste? How do we go about doing it?
So my question is, what about the saffronization of textbooks that has been happening in India? So how do you deal with those?
Hi, this is Naved. I just had a question. What do we do now? What is the roadmap for change? I mean, we have the elections coming up next year in Karnataka in 2 years, less than 2 years, and the general elections are coming up. So do you think the fight is primarily a legal fight that we need to be doing? Because all of you are mostly lawyers, and I know you have been doing a great work. But is there something else that we can create a roadmap for and ensure, that we implement that together?
the question of annihilating caste, that's a given. It has to be done. That's something that we need to do. And how we do it is, of course, a very, very serious question. If we go back and if you were to see, for instance, even say Baba Sahib's own writing, his seminal text, Annihilation of Caste, and how this entire notion of intercaste dining, then intercaste marriages, he moves way beyond that. And because for him, caste is Hinduism. There's no Hinduism without caste. And then he talks about the entire, about the texts and how the text will have to be dismantled. I would think, see, times have changed in that sense. And this question is something that requires much more thought. The way I look at it is that, at least in terms of, in a practical way, now all of us, we are not just individuals, we're part of society. We have our own families, the kind of our social relations, organizations we're part of, whether they're movements or anywhere else. I think we need to start with ourselves as well, especially people who come from dominant castes, but otherwise also. And in that, I think, for, if you were to look at, say for instance, your interactions with sanitation workers. One of the things that our workers, and it was a big fight that happened later on, that during the lockdown, all the hotels were closed. So the workers generally get water from the hotels because no house will give them drinking water. So because of the lockdown and the hotels being closed, the workers used to go and knock on the gates of people and say, give us drinking water. And drinking water would be given in bathroom mugs to them. And it was something that workers were so angry about. So these practices that are there, we'll all have to fight these practices. I think beyond that, if you were to look at the kind of, say, the practices of untouchability, of hierarchy, etc. that are taking place, it's for all of us to join hands and fight that. It cannot be that, in Baragur, which is in Koppal district, where a young Dalit boy is killed only because he is in a romantic relationship with a girl from a different caste. If something like that happens, that it cannot be that we just, we feel shocked. It's something that we have to do something about it. So if you look at what happened over there, that entire community mobilized itself. There was no FIR being registered. They ensured the FIR got registered. Then they had to sit on the street to ensure that some investigation takes place. Then they had to do a 1-week jata from their village to Koppala to ensure that the accused are even picked up for questioning, let alone arrested. And it was all done only by the Dalit organizations. And of course, our organizations are all part of it. My question is, why is it that we are not part of these struggles? So when you have an entire community which is mobilizing itself, you have other organizations that are mobilizing in contesting caste on an everyday basis, I would imagine let's start with that. And this dialogue that we need to have, this roadmap that we need to have for annihilation of caste, it's a very, very necessary one. But that, I think, is something that has not been thought out through. That is something that we really need to spend some time. The second thing about the saffronization of textbooks is it's not a new phenomenon. When Murli Manohar Joshi was the education minister, he made it a national pastime to change every single textbook at that point. If I'm not mistaken, that went up all the way to the Supreme Court, and Aruna Roy's case, and a rather disappointing judgment. I'll just leave it at that. The only way we can contest that is by ensuring that they don't have power. They're not only saffronizing textbooks, they're changing history. An history that doesn't exist is being created. Mythical figures are becoming historical figures. So the only way to stop them is to ensure that they don't get political power. And the battle that we fight for that is not just an electoral battle. And I think, it connects to what my friend was asking. It is not a legal battle. Of course, we will fight them in every arena. In fact, I actually had written a few points on that, but I didn't want to go through it because it was seeming a little bit almost, prescriptive in that nature, in that sense. But when the attack is on all fronts, we will fight them on all fronts. That should be our slogan. So if they are there in the courts, if you have an Ashwini Kumar Upadhyay who is the accused in a hate speech in Delhi, who's filing petition after petition in the Supreme Court, in the High Courts, and getting orders. If the right wing, if the RSS has their own association of advocates then we will fight them over there. If they are going to work among students, we'll have to fight them over there. If they are building the Bajrang Dal as an organization of Dalits, we'll have to fight them over there. So the point is, see, one, of course, on the ground we'll have to take them on, but the battle is of an idea. And the idea is of whether we are going to have an inclusive nation, where actually these primordial kind of identities that we have is something that we can set aside, and that you'll have something that you're really going to imagine. The kind of life that some of them lead, if you're 24/7 thinking about how you're going to make the life of a Muslim miserable, the quality of their life is pathetic in any way. And that's all that they can think of. But that is what they're devoted to. So this idea, we'll have to take this idea to the people. We will have to ensure that we organize every section of society against them. And like I said, it's not about winning elections. Elections is something that happens once in 5 years. That vote that you cast could be turned in any which way. It could something that could be turned overnight. I'm not undermining the value of it, but I'm saying that that cannot be where we are focusing all our energies only. We have to ensure this kind of radicalization that is taking place, this normalization of hatred that is taking place every single day. We in our own homes, at our dinner tables, we have to have those conversations. In our organizations, we have to have those conversations. We have to ensure that we popularize the notions of democracy. This entire thing of fraternity, I think one of the good things that has come over the last 3 years, if you see the struggles that are taking place, like after Shaheen Bagh especially, where you have Dalit organizations, farmer organizations, and Muslim groups all coming together to say that, we're going to fight. A lot of these alliances are taking place at the top of the organizations. It has to be bottom up. In every single village, in every single slum, in every single locality, we have to come together and say that we will fight any kind of right-wing, any kind of a fascist attack that comes over here. It's going to be a long, drawn-out struggle. And we are going to be in the trenches for that. So let us really roll our pants up, because the trenches is where all of us will have to be. There's no other option now.
Clifton, in your statement, you said that Hinduism stands on casteism. It's true. And it's not only in Hinduism, I'm telling you. For example, just 13 kilometers from here, if you go to Harubale, the whole village is a Christian village. Yet you will find the practice of casteism in such a way, you cannot make any difference. And secondly, the positive aspects that are happening now is, for example, the Karga festival. In the Karga festival, the first, the puja, it's a sort of puja happens in the dargah. And the right-wing forces are trying to stop it for nearly, if I'm right, for past 6-7 years. And these are the celebrations by the communities which are directly involved in human labor. It is by the Tiglas, who are experts in floriculture and sericulture. And here in Seppings Road, you will find a temple where the Mutyalama festival happens. And here it is fully by the community, which the barber community, where no one takes claim of, everybody celebrates. And these are the festivals that need to be identified, or which is very much just under our nose. And these are the things that will be in positive response to all the evils. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clifton, for that, as Arvind says, your very compelling lecture and radiating so much of hope. I'm sure Hasan Mansur would be delighted listening to you from above. Regarding these tremendous instances of hope that you gave us, what do we do as civil society to magnify them? These have been excellent grassroots initiative. And secondly, what more should civil society, one thing is the PUCL is doing excellent work, but to create this mass movement, perhaps even our political movement in the country, which we certainly need at this juncture. What more do you think we should be doing? It doesn't matter if you're prescriptive, but please say it.
ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ 2 ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಇತ್ತು. ಒಂದು, ಭಾಳಷ್ಟು ಜನ ನಾವು ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಸಿನಾರಿಯೋಲಿ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಸಮ್ ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಇಸ್ ದೇರ್ ಎನಿ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ವಿ ಕುಡ್ ಡ್ರಾ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಅದರ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಸಮ್? ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ಸ್ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ನೋಡಿ ತೊಗೊಳ್ಬೋದಾ ಅನ್ನೋದು. ಅದ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೇ ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕಕ್ಕೆ 100 year ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಇದೆ. ನಾವು ಯಾಕೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಪದೇ ಪದೇ ಮರಿತೀವಿ? ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಏನೋ ನಾವು ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಫ್ಯಾಸಿಸಮಲ್ಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಲ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಏನೋ ಹೊಸದಾಗಿರೋದು, ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಸಹಬಾಳ್ವೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಾವೇ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಲ್ವಾ ಆ್ಯಸ್ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟಿವಿಸ್ಟ್ 100 years ಆಫ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಲ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್, ಕಮ್ಯುನಲ್ ಇಶ್ಯೂಸ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಯಾಕೆ ಸಹಬಾಳ್ವೆಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂತ ಅದು ಒಂಥರ ಸುಳ್ಳು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಿರುಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವ ನಾವು ಅಂತ ಐ ಫೀಲ್ ಕನ್ಸರ್ನ್. ಸೊ is there anything that you could reflect on?
The point on Dalit Christians is definitely it's there. It's something we cannot escape that. All other communities, there is also the question of Dalit Muslims as well, and the struggle, especially that the Dalit Christians have been waging for reservations to be included. I think it's the Ranganath Mishra report, the implementation of which has been going on for so many years. Definitely, I think these are also issues that we need to take up. I think the second point that was made, I think links up also to what Shashank was asking. We say that that there has been this communal harmony, and it's almost like there's a disruption now. Whereas Karnataka has this history of almost 100 years of communal rights, which is absolutely right. I don't think that these are standing against each other, in my opinion. We definitely have, and Karnataka has especially, this very rich syncretic traditions which the RSS has not been able to defeat. Karaga, for instance, the RSS has been trying repeatedly to ensure that the beginning of the Karga does not go to that masjid. In one of the temples, I think in Belur, where there's a chanting of the Quran, I think, if I'm not mistaken, before the prayer, before the puja, they tried to stop that as well, and they've not been able to stop it. So I think these syncretic cultures that are there, definitely they are extremely important, and that is something that we need to highlight. But does that mean that we live in a society that is fully in communal harmony? Definitely not. And which is why I was referring to what Rukmani's book says. And I think it's quite shocking the way in which, especially this communal polarization has made people so prejudiced and biased. I think the spectrum, if you look at the entire spectrum, say from a prejudice to all the way of hatred to the extent that you can kill someone, if that's the spectrum, you'll find shades of it in almost every single person now. In Christian communities, I have seen this, where there is particular kind of way of referring to Muslims. They almost this sense of doubt, So when you talk about, say, unity, it's something that does not come to their mind. So this prejudice against the Muslim all the way to hatred is something that we really need to be, of course, it exists, but I don't think that it means that there's never been a time where, or even now, occasions where, places where people have been able, have actually overcome this kind of a religious hatred. I think that is something that we really need to bear in mind. And the point is this, I mean, when we want to think about how we're going to work at this, it's taken 100 years for the RSS to get where they've got. 100 years. And they have worked at it. I remember sometime back, a bunch of my friends, we play football in the mornings. So we lost our ground. Somebody else came and took it for parking that day. So some ground we went and found, and we were playing. And while we were playing football at some 6 in the morning, there's a shaka that starts over there. Say around 6:30, 6:45, the shaka begins. So the shaka obviously is more interesting than football for me. When it comes to it, football though is the most interesting thing for me. I went and sat there, and what is the game that they are playing? And these are kids. Okay, so they have these all the way from your 5-year, 6-year-old kid till say your 11, 12-year-old kids. And then you have these 2-3 seniors who are running it. This is a time when they still used to wear khaki cheddis. Now they are wearing those long pants. This was still when they were wearing half pants. So the game is this. So they draw 2 circles. One circle at a distance, and one person sits in the middle, and they're protecting. And the story that they build is that this Muslim is going to come and try and kidnap this Hindu girl. So you have to protect her. And it's a game. So the kids are jumping and screaming. The kidnapper is trying to kidnap. The others are trying to save the... But can you imagine what is being wired into the kids' minds? This they do on an everyday basis. Every single day. So if you look at the effort that they've put in to entrench their ideology in society, we will have to counter that. We will have to work as hard as that. Some of my friends over here, in fact, I must say, this entire thing that is happening around the textbooks, every single day they have gone to colleges, stood outside colleges and just given pamphlets, told students that, see, this saffronization that is happening is something we must object to. It is not good, not just for us. It's not good for society. And they've managed to collect these signatures from students. For some people that will not seem important. But I believe that is so fundamental. You're talking to students, you're trying to communicate with them. It's not like one Bhashan Bazi where, you gathered some 500 people and pelo vaase. This is where you are talking to every single person. You're answerable to the questions that they ask. That's the kind of backbreaking work that is required. And people are doing it. It's just that we have to do it on a much larger scale. So if we are working in the slums, if we are working with urban deprived communities, we need to ensure that alongside asking the questions of access to land, access to basic amenities, the question of dignity, we also have to talk about how do we ensure that a democracy actually survives. Because the survival of a democracy means at least something for you. It means that you can at least get access to some rights. Fascism and democracy cannot shake hands. So I think this work is what we need to do. And I think it's happening to some extent. It's just that this agenda, it's almost like fighting fascism is different from what trade unions do, than what farmers do, what urban deprived communities do, what anyone else does. And some PUCL-Karnataka, or many years ago, Karnataka has a very rich tradition of organizations that have fought communal disharmony, like Karnataka Koma Saurda Vedike, extremely inspiring organizations that did the work. But it almost becomes that this is your job. And all of us, we have something else to do. It cannot be that way now. All of these struggles have to come together. And I think that I think is actually an opportunity that has presented itself to us. Today, for the farmers groups, for the trade unions, for the women's organizations, for the transgender, the sexual minorities, every single section that is facing the brunt of this attack, to come together. And they're facing the attack in different ways. But to come together and fight. And I think that opportunity is what we need to really seize.
ತುಂಬ ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್. ತುಂಬ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಆಯಿತು. ಈಗ ಏನಾದರೂ ಮಾಡು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಫುಲ್ ಎನರ್ಜಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಾನು ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೆ. ಈ ಜಾತಿ ವಿನಾಶದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಬಂತಲ್ವ. ಜಾತಿ ವಿನಾಶದ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬರು ಹೇಳಿರೋ ಬಹು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ವಿಷಯ, ಇಡೀ ಜಾತಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ನಿಂತಿರೋದು ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಲೈಂಗಿಕತೆಯ ನಿಯಂತ್ರಣದ ಮೇಲೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಮಹಿಳೆಯರನ್ನು ಜಾತಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯ ಹೆಬ್ಬಾಗಿಲುಗಳು ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಪಿತೃಪ್ರಧಾನತೆಯನ್ನು ನೀವು ಹೊಡಿದೇನೆ ಜಾತಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ನೀವು ಹೊಡೆಯೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳ ವಿಮೋಚನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾತಾಡ್ದೇನೆ ನೀವು ಜಾತಿ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಒಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರನೇ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬರು ಅವರ ಚಳುವಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಣ್ಣುಮಕ್ಕಳು ಇರಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಗಾಂಧಿಯಷ್ಟೇ ಪ್ರಭಾವಶಾಲಿಯಾಗಿ ಹೆಣ್ಣು ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನು ಜಾತಿ ವಿನಾಶ ಚಳುವಳಿಗೆ ಸೆಳೆದಂಥವರು ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರು ಮತ್ತು ಜ್ಯೋತಿಬಾ ಫುಲೆ ಅವರು. ಎರಡನೇ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಾಗ, ಇದಾಗಲೇ ಒಂದು ಇವರು ಮಾತಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ನಾವು ಆ ಥರ ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಸೆಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ಗಳಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಪ್ರಗತಿಪರರು ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿರೋರು ಮುಟ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಥರದ್ದು ಹಲವಾರು ಜಾತ್ಯತೀತವಾಗಿರುವಂತಹ ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ಧಾರ್ಮಿಕ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಕ್ಷೇತ್ರಗಳು ಇದ್ದಾವೆ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಆ ಕಡ್ಕೋಳ ಮೌನಪ್ಪ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ತಿಂತಿಣಿ ಮೌನೇಶ್ವರ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಅಂದರೆ ಯಾರು ಹಿಂದೂ ಯಾರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಕಡ್ಕೋಳ ಮಠದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಪಲ್ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ಆಗಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಶಿಶುನಾಳ ಶರೀಫನ್ನು ಗೋವಿಂದ ಭಟ್ಟ, ಶಿಶುನಾಳ ಶರೀಫ ಸಾಬಾ, ಶಿಶುನಾಳ ಇವನು ಗೋವಿಂದ ಭಟ್ಟ ಒಬ್ಬ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಣ. ಇಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕಿ ತೆಗಿಯೋ ಅಂಥದ್ದು ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಗ ಆಗಬೇಕು. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲೂ ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ದೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ನು. ಅದು ಲಾ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಅದು ಸಾಂಸ್ಕೃತಿಕ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಭಾರತದ ನಿಜವಾದ ಇತಿಹಾಸವನ್ನು ಮರುರೂಪಿಸುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಭಾರತದ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಇವ್ರು ಹೇಳೋವಂಥ ಗೋಡ್ಸೆನೂ ದೇಶ ಪ್ರೇಮಿ ಅಂತಲೇ ಅವ್ರು ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು. ಹಾಗೇ ಗಾಂಧಿ ನೆಹರು ಅವರು ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಇದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ ನೆನಪಾಗುವಂಥದ್ದು 2 ಕತೆಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ಅದು ಬೇಸರ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಡ್ರಿ. ನಾನು ಭಾರತದ ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಿರಂತರವಾಗಿ ಹೊಡೆದಾಡಿರೋಂಥ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹುಡುಕಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ ನಾನು. ಇದು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯರ ಭಾರತ. ನನಗೆ 2 ಕತೆಗಳು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂತು. ಒಂದು ಕುಯಿಲು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋಳು, ಒಬ್ಬ ರಾಣಿ ಅವಳ ಗಂಡನ್ನು ಕೊಂದು ಅವಳನ್ನ ಕಾಡಿಗಟ್ಟಿ ಕಿತ್ಕೋತಾರೆ ಸಾಮ್ರಾಜ್ಯನ. ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಳು ಕುಯಿಲು ಅನ್ನೋ ಹುಡುಗಿ, ಅವರಪ್ಪ ಅವ್ರ ತಾಯಿ ಸತ್ತೋದಾಗ ಈ ರಾಣಿ ಹತ್ರ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದು ಬಿಡ್ತಾನೆ. ಈ ಕುಯಿಲು ಎಂಥವಳು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಕೊನೆಗೆ ಈ ರಾಣಿ ಕಾಡಲ್ಲಿ ರಾಜ್ಯನ ಕಟ್ಟಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ತಿರ್ಗಾ ತನ್ನ ಸಾಮ್ರಾಜ್ಯನ ಕಿತ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷರದು ಅಂತ ಹೊಡೆದಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತಾಳೆ. ಒಂದು ಜಾಗ ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಈ ಶಸ್ತ್ರಾಸ್ತ್ರಗಳನ್ನು ಇಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕ್ಯಾಪ್ಚರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳದೆ ಇವಳು ಗೆಲ್ಲಕ್ಕಾಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಈ ಕುಯಿಲು ಮಾಡೋದೇನು ಅಂದರೆ ಅದು ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನದ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ದಿವಸ ಮಾತ್ರ ಈ ಬ್ರಿಟಿಷರು ದೇವಿ ಪೂಜೆ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಳಗೆ ಬಿಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಇವಳು ಒಳಗೋಗಿ ಇಡೀ ತುಪ್ಪದ ಗಡಿಗೆನ ಅವಳ ಮೈ ಮೇಲೆ ಉಯ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೆಂಕಿ ಹಚ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆ ಶಸ್ತ್ರಾಗಾರದೊಳಗಡೆ ನೆಗೆದು ಬಿಡ್ತಾಳೆ. ಕೊನೆಗೆ ನನಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ತುಂಬ, ಅದನ್ನು ಓದ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನೋವಾಯಿತು. ಇಡೀ ಛಿದ್ರ ಆಗಿರೋ ಅವಳ ದೇಹನ ರಾಣಿ ತೊಡೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಳ್ತಾಳೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ನಿಸ್ವಾರ್ಥವಾಗಿ ಇವರು ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊಡೆದಾಡಿರೋದು. ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಳು ದೇವಿ ಅಂತ, ಅದು ಉತ್ತರ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಹೆಣ್ಮಗಳು. ಒಂದು ಹಳ್ಳಿಯಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಅಣ್ಣ ತಮ್ಮಂದರು ಸ್ವತಂತ್ರದ ಸಂಗ್ರಾಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಗಿರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಜೈಲಿಗೆ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರನ್ನು. ಜೈಲಿಗೆ ಹಾಕೋ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಮನೇಲಿರೋದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇಫ್ ಗಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಚಿನ್ನನೆಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಅಂಡೆಗೆ ತುಂಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೊಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಊತ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ತಮ್ಮನಿಗೆ ಮೊದಲು ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅವ್ನು ಬಂದು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಎಕ್ಸೈಟ್ಮೆಂಟಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಒಂದು ನೋಟ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ತಾನೆ ಅಣ್ಣನಿಗೆ, ನಾವು ಎಲ್ಲಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ವೋ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಯಾರ ಕೈಲ. ಅವನೇನೋ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಲೀಕ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ ಸುದ್ದಿ. ಇದನ್ನು ಒಬ್ಳು ದನ ಮೇಸೋ ಹೆಣ್ಮಗಳು ನೋಡಿರ್ತಾಳೆ. ಮಳೆ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಸುರಿದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಏನೋ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಹಂಡೆನ ಎತ್ತಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕುಡ್ಕ ಗಂಡ ಇವನು ಬಂದು ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾನೆ, ಸಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲ. ಪೊಲೀಸರು ಬರ್ತಾರೆ, ಇವರಿಬ್ಬರನ್ನ ಸಾಯ ಮಠ ಹೊಡಿತಾರೆ ಕಾಡೊಳಗಡೆ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡೋಗಿ. ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂಡೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲ ಮುಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಣ್ಣನೂ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಒಂದು ದಿವಸ ರಾತ್ರಿ ನಾಕಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಡೋರ್. ಯಾರು? ಈ ದೇವಿ. ಆ ಗಂಡ ಸತ್ತೇ ಹೋಗಿರ್ತಾನೆ, ಅವನೊಬ್ಬ ಕುಡ್ಕ, ಅವನಿಂದನೂ ಹಂಡೆದನ್ನು ಅಷ್ಟು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದು ವಾಪಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾಳೆ. ಅವನಿಗೆ ಶಾಕ್ ಆಗಿ, ನೀನೊಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದ್ರು ತಗೋ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಬೇಡ ಅಂತ, ನೀನು ಫಸ್ಟು ಅದರೊಳಗಡೆ ಏನೇನಿದೆ ಲೆಕ್ಕ ಹಾಕೋ, ನೀನು ಇಟ್ಟಿರೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನಾನು ರೈಟ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ. ಅವ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಅವನಿಗೆ ತಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕಾಗದೆ ಒಂದು ಸರಾನ ತಗೊಂಡೋಗಿ ಅವಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಕಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾನೆ. ಹುಷಾರು, ನನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಕಬೇಡ. ಈ ಆಪತ್ತನ್ನು ಕಾಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನನ್ನ ಗಂಡನ ಕಳ್ಕೊಂಡೆ, ಪೊಲೀಸರಿಂದ ಒದೆ ತಿಂದೆ, ಇದು ಇದ್ದರೆ ತಲೆಬೇನೆ ನನಗೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ವಾಪಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ನಾನು ಹೋಗಿ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಯ್ತಾಳೆ. ಗಾಂಧೀಜಿನ ಕರೆಸಿ ಸನ್ಮಾನ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಇಂಥದ್ದು ಸಾವಿರಾರು ಜನ ದುಡಿದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯರ ಭಾರತ. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಹೆಸರು ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸ್ಥಾನ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ, ಅವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲರೂ ನಾವು ಸ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಆಗಸ್ಟ್ 15. ನಾವು ಈ ಸಲದ 75 ಅಮೃತ ಮಹೋತ್ಸವ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯೋತ್ಸವ 75. ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾರತದ ಸ್ವಾತಂತ್ರ್ಯ. ನಾವು ಆಚರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಈ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯರ ಹೆಸರಿನಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮಾಡೋದಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಅವರಿಗೆ ಕೊಡೋ ಉತ್ತರ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ನನಗೆ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳನ್ನ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳಿಲ್ದೆ ಏನೂ ಆಗಲ್ರಿ, ಜಗತ್ತು ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಲ್ಲ, ಚಳುವಳಿನೂ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣನೇ ಅಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಎಲ್ಲದನ್ನೂ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳ ಜೊತೆಲಿ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿರಿ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ನೀವು ಗಂಡ ಹೆಂಡರು ಮಿತ್ರರ ಥರ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಇವನೊಬ್ಬನೇ ಗಂಡಸು ರಾಜಕೀಯ ನಾಯಕ ಹಿಂಗಂತ ಹೇಳಿರೋದು ಅಂತಂತೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಪುಲೆ ಅಂತೂ ನನ್ನ ಕಾಮ್ರೇಡ್ ಅಂತಿದ್ದ ಅವನು ಹೆಂಡ್ರನ್ನ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಆ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು ಶಾಹೀನ್ ಬಾಗಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು ನಿಲ್ದೇ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ ಆಗ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬ ರೈತ ನಾಯಕ ಯಾರು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ದೇಶ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸುತ್ತಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದದ್ದು ನಮಗೆ ರೊಟ್ಟಿ ಬೇಯಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರೋ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳಿಗೆ. ಆ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳನ್ನೂ ನಾವು ಮರಿಬಾರ್ದು. ಈ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳನ್ನ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ತಗೋತೀರಾ? ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಅವರು ಇವತ್ತಿಗೂ ಧರ್ಮನ ಹೇರಿರೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ, ನಿಯಮಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇರಿರೋದು ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ಗಂಡಸರು, ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿಸಿ ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್ ಟು ಜನ್ರೇಷನ್ ಹೊರಿಸೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ತಲೆ ಮೇಲೆ. ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಸೇರಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳದೆ ನಾವು ಬದಲಾಗ್ದೇನೆ ನಾವು ಏನೂ ಬದಲಾಯಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಪೇಟ್ರಿಯಾರ್ಕಿನೂ ಬಂಡವಾಳಶಾಹಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇನೆ ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿರೋದು. ಅದನ್ನು ಒಡಿದೆ ನಾವು ಜಾತಿನೂ ಒಡೆಯೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಕ್ಲಾಸನ್ನು ಒಡೆಯೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ, ಬೇರೆ ಏನನ್ನೂ ಒಡೆಯೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ನಂಗೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಜೊತೆಯಲ್ಲೇ ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ನೆನಪಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ನನಗೆ. ಈ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರ್ ಹತ್ರ ಎಷ್ಟೇ ಕೋಪದಿಂದ ಹೋದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಸೆಕೆಂಡಿಗೆ ಮೆಲ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ. ನನ್ನ ಪಕ್ಕ ರಾಮದಾಸು ಕೂತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ಕ್ರೋಧದಿಂದ ಹೋದ್ರೂ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಹಾಗೆ ಕರ್ಗೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹಿಂಗೂ ಇರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನಾ ಅಂತ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಷನಿಗೆ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ, ಐ ವಾಸ್ ಅರೆಸ್ಟೆಡ್ ಯೆಸ್ಟರ್ಡೇ, ಐ ವಾಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಸ್ಟೇಷನ್ and there was some slum demolition I went ಅಂತ ಅದನ್ನು ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಸ್ವೀಟಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ರು. ನಾನು ಹೆಂಗಸಾಗಿ ಆ ಹೆಣ್ತನನ ಅವರಿಂದ ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಇದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲನ್ನ ಏನೋ ರಾಂಗ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಆಗಿ ಒತ್ತಾಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದನೋ ವಾಪಸ್ಸು ಇವನಲ್ಲ ಆ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ ಅಂತಂದಾಗ ತಗೊಂಬಂದು ಒಂದು ಬೆಳಗ್ಗಿನ ಜಾವ ಕಾರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಯಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ತುರ್ಕಿದ್ರು, ಎಸ್ತು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೊಂಟೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರು ಕಾರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ. ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲು ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಹೇಳ್ರಿ? ಕಾರಿಂದ ಈಚೆಗೆ ಎಸೆದ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಾಯಿನಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಬಟ್ಟೆನೆಲ್ಲ ತೆಗೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸುತ್ತ ನೋಡಿದ್ರಂತೆ. ಇದು ಅವ್ರ ಫ್ರೆಂಡು ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಲಾ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ನಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಕತೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ನನಗೆ ಕತೆ ಹೇಳೋದು ತುಂಬ ಇಷ್ಟ. ಬಿದ್ದರು, ಎಸ್ತು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರಲ್ಲ, ಮೈಯೆಲ್ಲ ನೋವಾಗಿದೆಯಂತೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಎದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬಾಯಿಂದ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ತೆಗೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಜಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಇದು ಕಡಲೆಬೇಳೆ ವಡೆ ಇಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲೋ ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ, ವಡೆ ತಿನ್ಬಿಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ರಂತೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದ್ರಂತೆ. ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಂಡತಿ ಏನು ಊಟ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲು, ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದನ್ನು ತಿಂತಾಯಿದ್ರು ಪಾಪ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ದೋಸೆ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ರಂತೆ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಂಡತಿ ಮೆತ್ತಗಿರೋದನ್ನು. ಆಗ ವಸಂತ, ಈ ದೋಸೆ ಬೆಟರ್ ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ ನನಗೆ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಒತ್ತಿ ಬಾಯಿಗೆ ತುರ್ಕಿದ್ರು ಅಂದರೆ ನಾಲ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಏಟಾಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿತ್ತು. ಇದು ಮೆತ್ತಗಿದೆ, ಬಹುಶಃ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನಾವೇನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದರೆ ಈ ಥರ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ತುರುಕಿದಾಗ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಈ ಥರ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ ಫುಡ್ಡನ್ನ ತಿನ್ನಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಅಂದರೆ ನನಗಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ ಆ ಪದ್ಯ ನಂಗೆ ತಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕಾಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನು ಹಂಗೆ ತಲೆಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ದನ್ನು ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ವರ್ವರ್ರಾವ್ ಏನಂದ್ರು, ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೆ ಹತಾಶರಾಗಬೇಡ್ರಿ, ಕಷ್ಟ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ನೋವಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸಂಕಟ ಪಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಆದರೆ ಹತಾಶೆ ಬೇಡವೇ ಬೇಡ, ನಿರಾಶೆ ಬೇಡ. ಒಂದು ಸಲನೂ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ. ವರ್ವರ್ರಾವ್ ಗೊತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಪಾಪ, ಅಲ್ಝಮೈರು ಇರೋದು. ಆ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗೆ ಆ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾನ್ ಸ್ವಾಮಿಗೆ ಕುಡಿಯೋಕೆ ಒಂದು ಪೈಪನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಟದೇ ಇರೋವಂಥ ಜನ ಇದು. ಬಟ್ ಅವ್ರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಡಿಗ್ನಿಫೈಡಾಗಿ ಎದುರಿಸಿದ್ರು ಕೋರ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಆ ಹುಡುಗಂದು, ಇನ್ನೊಬ್ಬ ಹುಡುಗಂದು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ, ಅವನದು ಅವನು ನೋಡಿ, ಅವನು ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಎದುರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ, ಹೊಡಿತಾನೆ ಅಂತಂದರೆ, ಒಡೆಯ ಮಗ ಏಸು ಹೊಡಿತೀಯೋ, ಇನ್ನೇನು ಪ್ರಾಣ ತಾನೇ ಹೋಗೋದು ಅಂತ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಅಲ್ಲಾಡಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಗಾಂಧಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದ, ಗಾಂಧಿಗಿರಿ ಬೇಕು ವಿತ್ ಆಲ್ ದ ರಿಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ಸ್, ವಿತ್ ಐ ಲವ್ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಅಲಾಂಗ್ ವಿತ್ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್. ಸೊ ನನಗೆ ಗಾಂಧಿಗಿರಿ ಬೇಕು ನನಗೆ, ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ನಾನು ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ನನ್ನ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಹಂಗೆ. ನಮ್ಮಪ್ಪ ನೀನು ಹೋಗಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡೋದು ಬೇಡ, ನೀನು ಹೋಗಿ ಕೂಡ್ದು ಅಂತ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾನು ಉಪವಾಸ ಕೂತ್ಕೋತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ನಾನು ಸಾಯ್ತೀನಿ ಬಿಡು, ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರೊಟೆಸ್ಟಿಗೆ ಹೋಗೋದೆ ಅಂತ ಇದ್ದೆ. ಆ ಗಾಂಧಿಗಿರಿನೂ ಬೇಕು. ಇವರಿಬ್ಬರು ಇದ್ದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ಮತ್ತು ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರು, ಅವರು ನಿಜವಾದ ಅರ್ಥದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು. ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಹೆಂಗರುಳು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಆ ಸಾಮೆ ತುಂಬ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಸಮಯ, ಅವನು ಹೆಂಕರುಳು ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಕರುಳು ಹೆಣ್ಣಿನ ಥರ ಇರಬೇಕು, ಹೊಟ್ಟೆ ತುಂಬ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ನೀಡೋದು. ಅಗ್ನಿ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅನ್ನ ಬಿದ್ದರೆ ಸಮಾಧಾನ ಆಗೋದು, ಅನ್ನ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಕೇಳೋದು, ಚಿನ್ನ ಅಂತೂ ಕೇಳೋದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅರ್ಗಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ಆ ಹೆಣ್ತನ, ಆ ಗಾಂಧಿಗಿರಿ ನನಗೆ ತುಂಬ ನೆನಪಾಗ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಹಸನ್ ಮನ್ಸೂರು. ಇವತ್ತು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಾಗಲೂ ಇವತ್ತು ಹಸ್ನಾಥ್ ಅವರು ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಒಂದು ದಿವಸ ಅವರು ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಏರಿರೋದನ್ನೇ ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಏರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರ ಮುಖ ನೋಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ನಮಗೆ ತಂಡ ಹೊಡಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸೋದು. ಏನೋ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳೋದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ನನಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಅಮ್ಮ ನೆನಪಾಗ್ತಾಳೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ದೊಡ್ಡ ರೆಸಿಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸನ್ನು ತೋರಿಸ್ತಿದ್ರು ಅಂದರೆ ಇವನ್ನ ಒಟ್ಟು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಎದುರಿಸೋದೇನು ಇದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡಲಿ, ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೋ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಇರಲಿ. ಅವರು ನಮಗೂ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ದಾರಿಗಳಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಅವ್ರದ್ದು 100 ವರ್ಷದ ಇತಿಹಾಸ, ನಮ್ಮದು 1000 ವರ್ಷದ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಇದೆ. ದಲಿತರಿಗೆ ಈ ಪೌರಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರದು 1000 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬರು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಷನ್ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಅಂಥ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಯುಯಲ್ ಸ್ಕ್ಯಾವೆಂಜರ್ಸ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕರೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಲೆಟರ್ನ ಬರೆದವರು ಬಾಬಾ ಸಾಹೇಬರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಸಾವಿತ್ರಿ ಬಾಪುಲೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಭಗತ್ ಸಿಂಗ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಇದ್ದಾನೆ. ನನಗೆ ಇವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಮೈತ್ರಿ. ಐ ಹೋಪ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ಲಾಫಿಂಗ್, ಅಪ್ರಿಸಿಯೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಎಸ್, ದೆನ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ಅಂದರೆ ಇವ್ರು ನೋಡಿ, ಅವಳು ನನಗೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ನನಗೆ ಇದು ಕಲ್ಲೊಡೆದಿರೋದು ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ, ಹುಬ್ಳಿದು ತಿಂತಣಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮೈತ್ರಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ಲು, ಹಾಂ ಸರ್ಸಿ ಅದೇ ಕಲ್ಲೊಡೆದಾಗ. ಯಾವಾಗ ಕಲ್ಲೊಡೆದ್ರು ಮಗ ಅಂತಂದರೆ, ಅದೇ ಈ ಹುಬ್ಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ ಕೇಸ್ಗೆ, ಅವರು ದಿ ಪೆಲ್ಟೆಡ್ ದ ಸ್ಟೋನ್ಸು ಒಡೆದೋಯ್ತು ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ತಿರ್ಗಾ ಕೇಳಿದೆ, ಇಲ್ಲ ಪೊಲೀಸರು ಹಿಂದೆ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದರಿಂದ ಬಚಾವಾದ್ವಿ ನಾವು, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಇದನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಗಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದರು. ಅವಳು ಎಷ್ಟು ಕ್ಯಾಶುವಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ಲು ಅಂತಂದರೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ಬಸ್ಸಾರು ಮುದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ, ಉಣ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದೆ ಅನ್ನೋ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಕ್ಯಾಶುವಲ್ ಆಗಿ. ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ಸಿ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದರು, ರೌಂಡ್ ಅಪ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು, ಕಲ್ಲುಗಳು ಹೊಡೆದ್ರು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಪೊಲೀಸರಿದ್ರು, ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬಂದ್ವಿ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ತಿರ್ಗಾ FIR ತಗೊಂಡ್ವಿ, ಆಮೇಲೆ ತಿರ್ಗಾ ಕೇಸ್ ಫೈಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಆ ಹುಡುಗರು ಈಚೆ ಬಂದ್ಲು ಅಂತ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಈ ಗಟ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕು ನಮಗೆ. ಇದು ದಿಸ್ ಕಮ್ಸ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಟ್ಸ್, ನಾಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಬೂಸ್ಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೈ ಎನರ್ಜಿ. ಸಚಿನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಬೂಸ್ಟಿಂದ ಅಲ್ಲ ಬರೋದು. ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಗಟ್ಸ್. ಆಸ್ ಲಾಂಗ್ ಆಸ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಪೀಪಲ್ ವಿತ್ ಗಟ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಹಾರ್ಟ್, ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಫೈಟ್. ಇದು ವಿನ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಲೂಸಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಯಾಟ್ಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಡೀಲ್, ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಕನ್ಫ್ರಂಟ್, ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ರೆಸಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಅವರು ಇದು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸಾಲು ಪದ್ಯ ಕನ್ನಡದವರಿಗೆ. ಅವರು ಬಾಂಬು ಬಂದೂಕು ಸೇನೆಯನ್ನಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡರು ಯಾಕೆ ಹೆದರುತ್ತಾರೆ? ಅವರು ಬಾಂಬು ಬಂದೂಕು ಸೇನೆಯನ್ನಿಟ್ಟುಕೊಂಡರು ಯಾಕೆ ಹೆದರುತ್ತಾರೆ? ಅವರು ಹೆದರುವುದು ನಾವು ಅವರಿಗೆ ಹೆದರುವುದನ್ನು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸುತ್ತೇವೆ ಎಂದು. ಅವರು ಹೆದರುವುದು ನಾವು ಅವರಿಗೆ ಹೆದರುವುದನ್ನು ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸುತ್ತೇವೆ ಎಂದು. ಅದನ್ನು ಬಿಡಬೇಕು, ಆ ಭಯ ಬಿಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ.
So, she was speaking of 2 or 3 things. The first point that she raised was how it is important for us to also make it an anti-patriarchal movement. Any movement against fascism cannot work without fighting patriarchy is the idea that she was pushing forth. The second one was also, she actually pulled out 2 stories in the sense of, in the sense that today we are in this year celebrating the 75th freedom movement. So she is trying to find out for stories. She is on the lookout for stories where freedom movement is about the commoners who contributed to it and not just about the leaders, be it Gandhi, Nehru or whoever it is. In the sense, she found 2 stories that she shared are very important. First story was about Kuilu and a queen. A queen who was pushed to the forest after her husband was killed in the struggle for freedom. Kuilu's father, a commoner's father, actually, just a second.
She builds her own empire again, and she wants to take on the British. But for that, there is a temple where all the weapons are there of the British alarm. So this Kuilu then, and it's in a temple which opens only once a week. So she basically sacrifices her life. She puts ghee on herself and she goes into that room and burns it down. So this queen then, she rocks her on her lap as she is dying. And so Sarsi was saying when she read about, while she was reading it itself, it's so moving. The second story she said was about Devi. Devi basically is a daughter of a shepherd. Ola Kayaro. So she come. ಸರ್ಸಿ ನೀವೇ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದು. ನೀವು ಸರ್ಸಿದು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಒಂದು ತಪ್ಪು ಹೇಳಂಗಿಲ್ಲ.
So Devi was from Uttar Kannada, and 2 of her brothers were in jail. Two brothers who were fighting for freedom was put into jail. But before they were put into the jail, they had hid out a pot of gold or some money in a pot, and they had placed it in a secret place. When the younger brother was released, he went to check it. He found that the pot is still there, and he sent a chat, or he sent a message to his elder brother, but somehow it was hacked, and the Britishers actually got to know of it. The police got to know of it, and then they came and tried looking for it, but it was not there. So after both the brothers were released, Devi actually came knocking to the door of the brothers, and then she handed over every thing that was in that pot and handed it over to them. So in that sense, the brothers offered to asked her if she would want a share out of the prize thing that they were having, but she refused, and she said, it has been a great headache for me to save this. I have lost my husband, I have lost a lot of things because of it. You better keep it. I do not want even a share of it. So in that sense, it was the freedom movement was not just about the leaders. The freedom movement was also about a lot of people whom we are not knowing of, and freedom movement stands for us. Freedom movement is about many such unrecognized struggles. Then she also insisted. She again insisted that women must be important section within this fascist or anti-fascist forces, and she also referred how Phule was referring to Savitribai as co-comrade. It is something that I hadn't heard of, but it's important, I think, that we note of it. And then she also was referring to Bal Gopal and Hasan Mansur. She was actually telling what they stood for, in the sense when Bal Gopal was once arrested by the police for no fault of his, and then it was known that it was not him whom they had to arrest, but it was a mistake, and he was thrown in some place. After he was tied, and his mouth was also tied. After he got himself released, he looked around the place, and then he went in search for some kadle vada for food, and then when he returned back home, he was speaking to his wife Vasanta Gopal, who offered him dosas. So he was like, I think we must stick to soft food just after we are released, and maybe that helps from the next time onward. So what she was referring to here was, in Kannada we call it hengaradu. I don't have a literal translation, maybe femininity. The femininity that even Hasan Mansur and Bal Gopal, two important human rights defenders, actually stood for, is something that we have to remember today.
Apart from that, and Bal Gopal, she was also referring to me as Bal Gopal's guardian. Yes, maybe you say, I don't know, I am no guardian to him or anybody. Yes, he did his law from my house. No, after he left APCLC, for 15 years or 16 years, he was the secretary of APCLC. And anyway, the fact is, 6 attempts were made on his life. But he didn't die. You see, once, what the kind of thing that she was referring, yes, a roller was thrown at the jeep that was passing. So they escaped the attempt. And Fernandez was also there in it. Okay? And Bal Gopal, usually he escaped. They escaped. Suddenly, because those places were very familiar for him, he knew that Olle red roti was available around. So if you pass that area, you will not be able to get that roti. So he said, all right, it's over. Anyway, let's have roti. And so all of them had roti. Yes, that was Bal Gopal. Bal Gopal, ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಮನೆ ಬಾಯಿಗೆ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಇಟ್ಟು ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಒಡೆದಿದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಸತ್ಯ, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ನಿಜಾನೇ. ಆದರೆ ಆತ ಏನು ಹೇಳಿದನಂದರೆ ಈ ಥರ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು. ನಾನು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮೊದಲೇ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ತಗೋಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ. ಏನು ನಾನು ಬಾಯಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇದನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಿತ್ತು, ನಾನು ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಇದು ಯಾರು ರೆಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಹರಗೋಪಾಲ್ ವೈಫು ಒಬ್ಬರೊಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಬರೆದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ನಾನು ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಟೈಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದರು ಅವರು. ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಅಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಅವ್ರ ಮನೆಗೆ ಬಂದು ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರು. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ನವ್ರು ಯಾರು ಇರ್ತಾರೋ, ಸಿವಿಲ್ ಲಿಬರ್ಟೀಸ್ನವ್ರು ಯಾರು ಇರ್ತಾರೋ ಅವ್ರ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು ವರವರರಾವ್ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ವರವರರಾವ್ ಈಸ್ ಎ ಪಾಲಿಟಿಷಿಯನ್, ಆ ಥರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಬೇಡ, ನಾನು ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರನೇ ಇರ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಬಂದು ಅಲ್ಲಿದ್ದ. ಅದು ದಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಹೀ ಸೆಡ್. ನಾವೇ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ತಗೋಬೇಕಮ್ಮ. ಇನ್ನು ಮುಂಚೆ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಂತ, ಡಸ್ಟರಿಂದ ಹೊಡಿತಾರಂತನೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆದರೆ ನಾನೇ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮೊದಲೇ ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೂ ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು, ತಿಂಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ತಗೊತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದರು. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ವಾಸ್. ಸೊ ನಾವು ಏನಂದರೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಭಕ್ತಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾದ, ನಾವು ಭಕ್ತಿಯಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರೋರು. ವೆದರ್ ಯು ಲೈಕ್ ಇಟ್ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್, ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದೇರ್. ಭಕ್ತಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಭಕ್ತಿ, ಸ್ಲೇವ್ರಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮಗೆ ಬಂದಿರೋದು, ಜನ್ಮತಃ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡೈಫಿಕೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಷ್ಟು ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಬಾಲ್ಗೋಪಾಲ್ ವಾಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಎ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಹಿಸ್ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಬೋತ್ ಆಫ್ ದೆಮ್ ವರ್ ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮನಿಸಮ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದರೆ, ಸಾರಿ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಎ ಲಿಟಲ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಸಿಲೆಬಸ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಇದೆ, ಬ್ರಾಹ್ಮಿನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಮೈಂಡ್ ಇದೆ. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಫಾರ್ ಎ ಲಾಂಗರ್ ಟೈಮ್ ದೇ ವರ್ ಎಜುಕೇಟೆಡ್. ಹಾರ್ಟು ಬೆಳೀಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಹೃದಯ ಬೆಳೆಯೋಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅವರು ಕುಟುಂಬನೇ ಬೆಳೀಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಕುಟುಂಬ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಂಪ್ರದಾಯ ಏನಿದೆಯೋ ಅದು ಬೆಳೀಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಆ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಮೇ ಬಿ ಐ ಆಮ್ ರಾಂಗ್, ಐ ಮೇ ಲೈಕ್ ಟು ಬಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟೆಡ್. ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಡೈಫಿಕೇಷನ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು. ಸರಸ್ವತಿ ಅವರು ಪೊಯೆಟ್ಟು, ಶೀ ಈಸ್ ಎ ರೈಟರ್, ವಂಡರ್ಫುಲ್ ರೈಟರ್, ಎಕ್ಸಲೆಂಟ್. ಅದು ಕನ್ನಡ ಮತ್ತು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷು ಕಲಿತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಳೆ. ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ತನಗೆ ಬರಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊತಾಳೆ, ಇಲ್ಲ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಾಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಕನ್ನಡನೂ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಷನ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಬಾಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಜ್ಞಾಪಕ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹಾಗೆ ಫೋನ್ನಲ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳಿಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ. ದೇವರು ಹೇಗೆ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದ್ರು ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಯಾವುದೋ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿತ್ತು ನಾವು. ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ವರ್ಡ್, ಏನು ಮತ್ತೆ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆಲ್ ದಟ್ ನೌ ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಸೇ ಈಸ್, ಈ ಡೈಫಿಕೇಷನಿಂದ ನಮಗಿದೆ, ಅದು ಜನ್ಮತಃ ಇದೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಹೊಗಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಹೊಗಳೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಮಾನವತ್ವ ಬೇಕು, ಮಾನವತ್ವ ಇದೆ ನಮ್ಮರಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದರಿಂದನೇ ನಾವು ಹೋರಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಮನುಷ್ಯರೇ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
Just a quick thank you to everybody for having stayed so long and for this really for staying for this compelling presentation. And thank you in particular to Father Arun from Ashirvad for having provided the premises, and a range of volunteers who helped pull this event together. And thanks to Clifton for having kindly consented to be a part of this program. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again.
If everybody doesn't mind, just one small announcement.
One important thank you, most important thank you. Clifton told me I forgot. Hey, SHASHANK. But absolutely brilliant, outstanding, fantastic.